to win the game tonight. Their roster features the reigning most valuable player of pro basketball, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. SGA is looking to become the fourth player since the year 2000 to win MVP, Finals MVP, and hoist the Larry O'Brien Trophy. He would join Shaq, Tim Duncan, and LeBron James. A very short list of rarefied air. He's been brilliant this year, and that is a team that can beat you in a bunch of different ways, and we'll talk about it on the program today. We'll get into it. Stanley Cup Finals, Game 1 last night. It was awesome in Edmonton. You can tell the Canadian fans are thirsty for Lord Stanley's Cup. Edmonton was able to get it done in overtime. And now we look ahead to Friday. Well, they'll try to take a 2-0 lead over the Florida Panthers up at Rogers Place in Edmonton, Alberta. Great game. Sam Bennett, free agent, man. We've talked about it with Neil Smith, and we'll talk about it today. The Utah Mammoth. I did it. Nice. It only took me a couple weeks. I did not call them the Utah Hockey Club. The Utah Mammoth with a bunch of different options this offseason to add to the group to potentially take that proverbial next step. Bill Armstrong will have about $20+ million at his disposal, maybe more, with some other roster decisions they have to make. So could they look at a guy like Sam Bennett, who has already won a Stanley Cup and had a couple of goals last night for the Florida Panthers? But we'll get you ready for Game 2. We'll talk some Utah Mammoth on the program today. And obviously just a few weeks away from the NBA draft, where the Utah Jazz find themselves with the number 5 and the number 21 overall pick, a couple second-rounders as well. And we'll continue to preview some of these prospects and talk some Jazz offseason, as the new sheriff in town is Austin Ainge, the loudest voice in the Utah Jazz front office, and that came from Ryan Smith himself. So we'll talk some Jazz offseason. They do not have the same optionality. There's your buzzword for the offseason with roster constructors as the Utah Hockey Club do. The only way they'll have cap space is if John Collins decides not to pick up his nearly $30 million player option. I would be very surprised if that didn't go down. But we'll get to it. Of course, some offseason college football, some offseason NFL, and some breaking news just about 40 minutes ago that Aaron Rodgers has emerged from his ayahuasca trip, talking to butterflies or whatever the hell he's been doing, to sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers. That feels like it's been coming for quite some time, but it is official. According to Brooke Pryor from ESPN, Aaron Rodgers is en route to Pittsburgh to sign with the Steelers and participate in their OTAs, in their minicamp. The world of professional golf is focused on Canada, just like the world of professional hockey, where the RBC Canadian Open is going on right now. We'll give you a leaderboard update, and we'll talk some golf on the program. RSL is off. It is a weird international break for Real Salt Lake this month. They only have 2 games. Their next game is going to be on the 14th, taking on D.C., and hopefully between now and then they can figure their you-know-what out. It has been pathetic. It has been uninspiring. That is a bad soccer team. It's been as bad as we've seen here for almost a decade. So a couple games and a lot of time for Pablo and his staff to figure it out. So busy show. A lot to do on the program today. Our first guest will be Timmy Goodtime Bontemps, who was just on SportsCenter on ESPN. He is live in Oklahoma City, as is Dave McMenamin, who will stop by after Tim does. So we go Tim Bontemps, Dave McMenamin, live in Oklahoma City. Get you ready for Game 1 of the NBA Finals tonight. Then we'll bring in our guy Paul Pugmire on a Thursday afternoon to talk RBC Heritage, to talk the World of PGA Tour, and the local golf scene as well. So we'll get with Paul today. Our friend Belle Frazier from the Salt Lake Tribune, who covers the Utah Hockey Club. Well, damn it. So close. Who covers the Utah Mammoth and also covers the NHL. So we'll talk some Stanley Cup Finals. We'll do some NHL draft and some NHL offseason with Belle Frazier. Our friends from Sports Court stop by, as they are often wont to do, on a Thursday afternoon, and we'll go from there. So Tim Bontemps, Dave McMenamin, Paul Pugmire, Belle Frazier, little Sports Court on a Thursday afternoon. Me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, and that guy, Porter Larson, Thursday afternoon. Yeah. Scale of 1 to 10, how, it's been interesting to listen to the conversation around the NBA Finals. I feel like this is a massive mismatch, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Just hoping to see good basketball. I don't care what cities these teams play in. But the NBA Finals tonight, how pumped are you?
I'm really excited just because it's obviously the 2 best teams in basketball as of right now. And, I don't really care what pundits say about the matchup, the cities. This is going to be a fun back and forth. I'm not necessarily claiming it goes 7 games, but I do think the basketball will be entertaining just based on the players that are on the floor. Now, mismatch, yes, but it depends on a few things, and it is Indiana's ability to get up and down the floor, and Spence, how physical are the Pacers allowed to play? That will dictate this series, I think, in a way that, you don't always like to talk about officiating, but with the way Shai Gilgeous-Alexander plays as your MVP, as your primary ball handler, and with how Indiana defends, that's something I think you look out for in game one, and something to leave a mark on the series.
So I think it's going to be a fun series. I don't think it's going to be a long series. I hope that it is. We'll get to it on the program today. Our first guest will be Tim Bontemps live in Oklahoma City. Want to let you guys know that Live Night Events presents the 2025 Granary Live Concert Series, powered by Nightingale College and Murdoch Hyundai, Utah's #1 Hyundai dealer. Experience outdoor concerts in the heart of downtown Salt Lake's Granary District. You can find more details on ESPN 700sports.com. Before we get to Good Time Timmy Bontemps on a Thursday afternoon, it's time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash with millions of members. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. There is only one series left in the playoffs, and the championship is officially on the line. That means time is running out for you to put your final takes to the test on Prize Picks, the best place to cash in on your favorite sports. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700. They're going to hook you up with $50 when you play your first $5 lineup. Promo code ESPN700 gets you $50 when you play that first $5 lineup. So download that Prize Picks app today and check it out. They're giving you a Game 1 NBA discount drop, a finals discount drop. Tyrese Halliburton initially more or less than 17.5 points. If you go act now, you can get Tyrese Halliburton more or less than 13.5 points with our good friends at Prize Picks. All right, couple things here. Game 1 of the NBA Finals tonight. Oklahoma City is taking on the Indiana Pacers. On paper, this is a massive mismatch. There's no other way around it. When you look at the regular season, they played twice. I don't necessarily dig into the regular season stuff because the playoffs are so different, and Indiana has been so good for so long. But in 2 games this year, OKC won both of them, and neither of them were very close. The most recent matchup was in March. OKC was without Chet. He was having some hip issues. In the 2 games that OKC and Indiana played, Tyrese Halliburton averaged 11 points and 5 assists. And when you go back and look at what they did, they just threw a ton of different looks at him. Indiana tried to bring him off the ball a little bit as opposed to have him the primary ball handler, and it just didn't work. A lot has been made about Indiana's pace, and that's a real thing. Okay, but here's the problem if you're rooting for the Indiana Pacers, which, side note, I never will do that. Indiana is a very, very fast-paced team that is built to get up and down the floor, and their lead guard, Tyrese Halliburton, makes them go as long as he is ticking and as long as he has the ability to get space and get shots off. The problem is there are way too many games where he's just a wallflower, way too many games where he just looks like a dude that's in the rotation. And Oklahoma City has ascended to this area and this level where they can look at you and say, how do you want to play? Okay, cool, we'll beat you like that. So in the playoffs, okay, this is just the playoffs, where the narrative surrounding the series is Indiana has the ability to get up and down the floor. The 3 fastest teams as far as pace of play goes this year in the playoffs, number 1 is Memphis. Now, obviously, that was a small sample size. They were out early. Number 2 is Oklahoma City, and number 3 is Indiana. Okay, OKC is the best team in pro basketball at taking care of the ball and turning you over, okay? And they have been for a couple years now. So they do want to get out and run. You know what? Let me rephrase that. They can get out and run. The issue with Oklahoma City, as far as what they want to do, they wait to see what you plan to do, and then they beat you at that. And that's what they've done all throughout the playoffs. That's what they did to Cleveland. It's what they did to New York. And I think it's what ultimately they'll try to do against Oklahoma City, but I don't know that they're going to have enough success because OKC can play that way. The cross matchups are going to be really interesting as far as who they decide to guard SGA with. The easy answer is probably Aaron Nesmith, but here's the problem. So Aaron Nesmith did a tremendous job in the conference finals against Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson might be 5'11". SGA is 6'8", and Aaron Nesmith is about 6'4". Okay, so there's the Pascal Siakam, option as far as putting him on SGA. Benedict Matherin's probably going to get some time. You have to look at more of these big physical players because when it comes to Andrew Nembhard, he's about 6'1", 6'2". He guarded Jalen well, but there's not a good matchup for Andrew Nembhard in this series. Now, Rick is still going to play him because he's played the same 11 players 15-plus minutes all year. But the reason Indiana had a lot of success against New York and their smallish lead guard is T.J. McConnell did not need to be 6'7" or 6'8" to guard a 5'11" Jalen Brunson. Neither did Andrew Nembhard or, again, Aaron Nesmith, who was just bigger than Jalen. And Jalen even had some success there. None of those three players will be able to guard SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And quite frankly, Cason Wallace comes off the bench. Alex Caruso isn't necessarily a guy who's a ball-in-hand decision-maker, initiator. There are a lot of just simply size cross-matchup issues for Indiana based off of how big and athletic Oklahoma City is. And what Oklahoma City has been able to do against other teams that have gone small, and they did this, by the way, against Minnesota when the Timberwolves decided for stretches during that series that Chris Finch did not want to play Rudy, and he went with Naz Reid in a smaller lineup. What Mark Daigneault can do, and what he has done, is he's sat Isaiah Hartenstein, and then he's put Chet Holmgren at the 5 and surrounded Chet with SGA, with Jalen, with Caruso, with Dort, with Cason Wallace, Isaiah Joe. And sometimes they bring in Kendrick Williams for Chet Holmgren, and they can go small that way. Oklahoma City can beat you at whatever game you want to play. And the other thing I love about this OKC team is out of the 16 teams that qualify for the postseason, Oklahoma City is 13th in three-point shooting. They don't need to rely on what the Celtics rely on, or oftentimes, honestly, what the Pacers had to rely on to beat the Knicks. Now, don't forget, Indiana needed an epic Aaron Nesmith fourth-quarter three-point show and a Tyrese Halliburton game-tying shot that hit the back of the iron and bounced 30 feet in the air and went through. If they didn't get those three-point makes, honestly, the Knicks are in the finals. We already talked about this. That Game 1 collapse New York had, it's tough to come back from that. So my prediction is simply this, and it's not a hot take. If you've been listening or watching, a lot of people feel this way. My respect for Rick Carlisle and what I just saw Indiana do by marching through the Eastern Conference only gives me space to not believe this will be a sweep. But beyond that, I think this is going to be an Oklahoma City drubbing. I'm taking OKC in 5. And I'm taking SGA as your finals MVP. It's the easy bet. It's the easy money, but sometimes the easy thing to do is the right thing to do. So, Porter, before we catch a break, I got OKC in 5. I got SGA as my MVP. Who you got and why? What's your finals prediction?
I'm going to say OKC in 6. I want to say 7. I do. And I go back to really the physicality that's not necessarily allowed. I don't want to, lean it on the refs, but the physicality that Indiana does play with, the urgency they kind of play with. If Miles Turner is able to, kind of muscle around with Chet Holmgren, if Benedict Matherin, Nembhard, Pascal Siakam, that quad group of players that you're going to throw at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, if they're allowed to, hand check a little bit and get up into him, I think you'd see a different series. And the onus is on them to kind of force that issue. Otherwise, they're going to be, I think, chasing him from behind in foul trouble a bunch of the series. But yeah, uphill for Indiana. But I think if that formula plays out, they'll have a better chance of making it interesting.
Some reports today from people who I will call reputable are indicating the Utah Jazz are right now looking to move on from Colin Sexton on a $19.1 million expiring contract. That's not a surprise. I would throw John Collins in there. I would throw Jordan Clarkson in there. And honestly, I might even throw Lowry and Walker in there, but we'll get to that coming up in just a little bit. Final thing, good news for Jazz fans. This NBA Finals features one top 3 pick from both teams, and it's Chet. Okay, so you don't have to have the number 1 overall pick to actually build championship teams, but you do have to actually draft well when you have certain picks in certain areas. And so far, the past couple drafts, have not been great for the Jazz. We'll go live to Oklahoma City coming up right off the bat. Timmy Goodtime Bontemps from ESPN rolls by. Then his buddy Dave McMiniman, Paul Pugmire, Bell Frazier Sports Court. We're jam-packed on a Thursday, and it's good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. All right, jam-packed today. We've got Dave McMiniman hopping by on the other side of 3 o'clock. Paul Pugmire for a little golf. Bell Frazier to talk Utah Mammoth and NHL Stanley Cup Finals. But batting leadoff, my man's been busy today. He was on SportsCenter earlier. Hoop Collective, of course, our guy Tim Bontemps on a Thursday afternoon prior to Game 1 of the NBA Finals. Timmy, happy Thursday, man. How you doing?
Doing well, Spence. How are you?
I'm good. I've got to start here. I don't know, man. 6-7 weeks ago, I was listening to, as a fan of the Hoop Collective, of course, having you and McMahon on quite a bit. And it felt about like a month and a half ago, you said something on the pod that you felt like there's a chance that Tom Thibodeau could be in some trouble. And I just went, what? It didn't make sense to me. And I will admit my bias right out of the gates. Tom was Jeff's assistant back in the day, as you know, and as a fan of this team since I was a kid, enjoying them being relevant has been fun. And I feel like they were ahead of schedule this year going to the Eastern Conference Finals, yet he's out in New York. So obviously you were on to some scent that most people weren't 6-7 weeks ago. What made you say that then, and what's your understanding of how this all went down today?
I mean, I just think ultimately this is a situation where, I think the irony of it is you had all these people who were saying things about, Tom's usage of players and rotation stuff and all this other stuff. And I don't think any of that stuff is why the Knicks are going to be finding a new coach. I think it's, if you look at Tom's history, and I like you, I also personally like Tom a lot. But if you look at his history, both in Chicago and Minneapolis, after a while, he, wore people down, and they eventually decided they wanted to have a different voice leading the team. And I think that's really the long and short of what happened here. And, it's certainly going to be interesting to see what the Knicks do. They obviously had a really good season. They have made it clear by letting Tom go now that the only thing that's acceptable next year is making the finals. Anything short of that will be a disappointment. And it is not clear to me that they're, A, going to be the favorite to make the finals next year, and B, that they're going to find a coach who will be better over the course of the 82 games in the playoffs than Tom Thibodeau was this year for the Knicks. But that being said, they clearly decided they wanted a different voice to be around this team and to try to get it to the next level. And there have been times in the past when this has worked, like when the Raptors went from Dwayne Casey to Nick Nurse, and when the Warriors went from Mark Jackson to Steve Kerr. And then there's been times when it really didn't work, like when Milwaukee went from Mike Budenholzer to Adrian Griffin, and when the Bulls went from Tom Thibodeau himself to Fred Hoiberg. So only time will really tell whether this is going to be, one of those two paths. But, you have to say that for the Knicks to do this right now, it certainly puts them in a position where there's not a lot of room for them to succeed with it. And, there was already going to be really high expectations in New York after the way this season went. And I mean, as you know, from personal experience, like how much people are desperate for this now 52-year title drought to end. And there's only going to be more pressure and more expectations now that the Knicks have made this move and made it clear what the acceptable outcome is. And if it's not that, then there's going to be questions about what happens next.
So, Tim, it just reeks of the kind of emotional knee-jerk move that kazoo-blowing, fedora-wearing idiot makes all the time as the owner of the organization. And it to me, it's a testament as to why they have been so irrelevant for basically 25 years. Was this a Dolan thing? Was it a Leon thing? I've heard all the rumors that it's a cat thing, CAA, whatever, but Tom's a CAA guy as well. Rumors that he didn't get along with Worldwide West. My guess is Tom probably doesn't love a guy that calls himself Worldwide West. I don't know. How did this go down? Why was this decision made?
I mean, it's probably going to sound like a duck. I don't think it really matters, honestly. Like, I think at the end of the day, like I said, I think if you look at the way this played out, if you fire Tom now, it's not because of the results. Right? So it's because of other stuff. And the first line of the release from the Knicks, because Leon Rhodes is not going to do media because he's done one interview in 5 years, and it was 4 years ago. The first line of the release said, our goal is to bring a championship to our fans. So the Knicks have made it clear that whoever they hire to be the coach like the expectation is they're going to have to win a title or they're going to have to be in the finals. And, I think they decided as a group that Tom wasn't the guy to get them there. And, there's always been all sorts of different bases of power at MSG, but at this point, I just don't really think the why is all that relevant, other than, to me, you better get this hire right. I thought McMahon said it well on the pod we did today. Like, if you're going to make this move and you're going to fire Tom, you can't mess it up. Because, whatever you want to say, again, if you want to argue that it was time for a change with Tom, that's all well and good. But if the Knicks hire some coach who win 45 games next year or, lose in the first or second round of the playoffs, then there's going to be calls to do a lot more than just change the coach. And that's why this is a pretty high wire act for everybody. And if you're talking about the longstanding dysfunction of the Knicks, this is the first time the Knicks have won a playoff series 3 years in a row since the 90s. Brought a level of stability and structure to the organization that was not there before. And, I think there's a very good chance that whoever they hire will not do as good a job as him. But I think the basic way you can look at it, I think, is if you fire a guy after getting to the conference finals for the first time in 25 years, you're not firing him because of the job he did.
So this is a much more attractive job than it has been probably since Jeff was fired. And you pointed this out earlier, and to be fair, I think 99% of Dolan's tenure as his, being the steward of both the Knicks and the Rangers have been pathetically embarrassing on his part. But the 1% that he has always done and will continue to do is he writes checks. He spends on front office. He spends on coaches. He spends on players. Mm-hmm. And it's a good roster. It is. This is a good job. I was surprised to hear McMahon say that he does think there's a little traction to this Jason Kidd stuff. Johnny Bryan, who played his college ball out here and was a developmental coach with the Jazz before going to New York and then Cleveland. Mm-hmm. Jay Wright, you know the names. So who do you think gets the job, Timmy?
I really don't know. And I think that's part of what makes this so interesting is that there isn't an obvious choice. There's just not. And that's what makes it so interesting to see ultimately what the Knicks decide to do and how it's going to go, because it's a great job. They have a ton of talent. The East is wide open. The Thunder are not sitting there. These players are under contract. They have runway. They're all in their prime, right? There are a lot of things about this Knicks job that are really attractive. It is the Knicks. You're at the Garden. They're going to pay. They're going to attract players. There are a ton of positives. And Leon Rose has done a really good job since taking over the team 5 years ago. You go down the list, there's a whole bunch of stuff. You're yeah, man, this Knicks job is as good a job as you could find, really. But at the same time, there's not a guy sitting there where you go, oh, hey, this is the number one guy to go get this job, and it's a slam dunk, and they're going to slide him right in, and it's going to be great. So that's why I say, to me, I do think there's a very real chance that whoever the Knicks hire will not do as well as Tom did. But that is why it's such a fascinating decision. And it's why what they do and how it goes is going to be an awfully, awfully interesting thing to watch over the next year or so as they make this decision over the next few weeks. And then we see how the roster looks next year and how the team performs with the new coach.
All right, moving out this way, it's been kind of a surprising busy news cycle here in Salt Lake City. So the Jazz hired Austin Ainge as their president of basketball ops. And during the presser, Ryan Smith had a couple of very interesting lines, namely, this is Austin's show. He will be the loudest voice in the front office. Ironically enough, Austin's dad is reporting to him, as is Justin Zanuck. And I continue to say a penny for Jay-Z's thoughts in an honest moment, but nonetheless, he's an NBA GM. He'll be part of this brain trust. This comes on the heels of Ryan and Ashley locking up Will Hardy, despite winning 34% of his games. So it's been interesting. It's kind of the anti-James Dolan approach. So what we have out here is a front office locked in, for a long time, a front office with a lot of smart basketball decision makers whose pedigrees and resumes speak for themselves. 14 years for Austin and Boston. And then he knows Will Hardy, and Will gets a contract extension. So they have everything they need locked in outside of players that are good at playing basketball, which, of course, needs to be figured out. What's your reaction to the news that Austin not only has been hired, but appears to have been given the keys to the kingdom?
Yeah, I mean, I was the one who broke that news on Monday, so
yes, you were.
I would say that is the case. I mean, he is going to be the president of basketball operations. He is going to be the voice there. I do think he and Justin Zanuck will get along really well. I've known both of them a long time. I think synergy-wise, that'll be good. I thought getting Will Hardy locked up for a long time was a very smart move. Will's a great coach. It is not his fault. The team has won 34% of its games while he's been in charge. Easily, I think he's already proven to be one of the best coaches in the league with just the limited abilities he's had to show, in the first half of the first couple of years he was on the sidelines. So, like you said, I think if you look at the Jazz holistically, there's a lot to be excited about in terms of the direction of the franchise and the people that are in place to lead it forward over the next several years. But the hardest part is getting the talent. And to do that, in part, you need luck, right? Obviously, the Jazz did not get luck in the lottery last month. But there are a lot of ways to get players. I think, as Austin also said on Monday, if you look at the teams that are playing in the finals, there are not a lot of super high draft picks on either team. I think there's one pick in the top 5 on both teams total. So certainly you can get talent a lot of different ways, and they've got a lot of smart people in Utah to do that. And I think if you're just talking about the management structure of the team between Danny and Austin and Justin and Will, I think that's, if not as good as any team in the league, it's certainly in the conversation with any elite coach and front office group in the league. So I think from that standpoint, again, if you're a fan of the team, you should feel pretty good about the brain trust Ryan Smith has put together. Now they've got to go get players. And when, I'm in Oklahoma City, you look at this Thunder team, which is set up to be arguably, in my opinion, the next dynastic force in the league. If you're measuring yourself against them, it is a long, long way to go to get from where the Jazz are to be anywhere within the same realm as that Thunder team. And that work has got to start this summer in terms of starting to get some players in there to start turning things around.
So one of the most interesting tidbits of Austin's presser a couple days ago is Sean O'Connell, who does our midday show and works for our station, asked Austin his personal opinion or philosophy on tanking or manipulating minutes. And Austin, with a little bit of a mic drop moment, just said, you will not see that this year, which is all fine and good, Tim. But here's the problem. As you know, the Jazz have a draft pick next year that's top 8 protected. And if they're not in the top 8, it goes to, you guessed it, the Oklahoma City Thunder, who, in my opinion, are about to win the world championship. So there's a way. There's a way you can do this, right? But to me, looking at what Washington did this year, watching Washington.
Can I cut you off?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is very simple, right? I appreciate Austin answering that question the way he did. I would also just say, if you look at the NBA standings, right, and you look at the rosters of teams around the league, it's pretty easy to see a world where the Jazz try to win every game and have one of the 5 worst records in the league. So I think that you could both say we are not going to try to win 17 games and also wind up winning 27 games and keeping the pick anyway. So I think, I will be curious to see, when you see that comment, the first thing you think is, well, there's one guy who's in the vicinity of an all-star caliber player on the team, right? And Lauri Markkanen. What is Lauri Markkanen's future in Utah? I think that's an interesting question. But if you look at the rest of the team, I think Will's a terrific coach, but if you're playing your young guys a ton of minutes and, they've got 2 more first-round picks this year, hopefully Taylor Hendricks is back healthy next year. There's, they've got Keontae George, they've got all these young players they can play. The Wizards are a good example. They played a bunch of young players this year. They didn't necessarily manipulate minutes, and they won 20 games. So I would just say that you can both lose a lot of games and not be quote unquote tanking. And I would bet a lot of money that the Utah Jazz are not giving up their draft pick to the Thunder next year.
So, and ultimately, I was going to land the plane where you landed it in a more salient way, because when I do look at this roster, let's say Lauri Markkanen, Walker Kessler, they're going to try to move off the other vets, Clarkson, Collins, and Colin Sexton, and they'll probably be able to do that because finally those contracts are expiring this year. But if you look at this roster and they do put their best foot forward to compete, and Markkanen is playing 65, 70 games, and Walker is playing 65, 70 games, and he's not shooting 7 threes a night, after they got fined.
Mm-hmm.
You're not wrong, Tim, about the scenario that could be in play. My point is, I feel like that's really close to like 30, 35 wins. And if we're sitting here, okay, but if we're sitting,
and that's because of how good the West is,
and that's not wrong. That's not wrong. Your point about Will, though, he's maximized every group he's had, and maybe Markkanen plays 75 games with 22 minutes a night. My fear is we're sitting here next spring and Mark Tatum pulls up the 9th pick and says the Utah Jazz are picking 9th and it goes to OKC. That would be a massive step in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be a problem. I really don't. And like I said, I think if you look at, and like I said, I think the better question to ask just in general is what's the future of Lauri Markkanen?
That's where I was going to go next. Yes, that's where I was going to go next.
I just don't. If you look at where the Jazz are, right? They have all these guys on rookie scale contracts. They have all these young players who need to develop. Hendricks, started to show some flashes early last year. Then obviously had the unfortunate injury, so hopefully he comes back healthy. But if you just look at where the Jazz are at, like Lauri Markkanen just doesn't really fit with the timeline of the team. So, I think especially if Lauri Markkanen is not on the team next season, I don't think there's any chance of them finishing with a record outside the bottom 8.
And there it is.
Or outside the bottom 5.
And there it is, yeah.
And even if he's on the team, honestly, Spence, I still think it's extremely unlikely that they are going to lose the pick because there's just the Jazz have a long way to go and the competition is stiff. And you have a lot of teams. There are very few teams that are going to be really in the business of trying to be bad next year. So, like I said, maybe stranger things have happened, but I would be very surprised if we're having a conversation next spring, April, March, April, May, about going into the lottery with the Jazz, really being in danger of losing that draft.
So I'll double down on the narrative in the area we're in. Do you think they move off of Lauri? And if so, what sort of return would he receive?
I don't know, and I don't know. And I say that because I think a lot of things are going to happen this offseason, and it's just very hard to know right now what the overall market in the league is going to look like. Because you have a lot of teams that are motivated to make trades and to do stuff. And you have, I think, a lot of teams that are going to be actively trying to do stuff. And you have a lot of players that could actively move. And in terms of figuring out what a guy like Lauri is going to deliver in a trade, in theory, some of that comes down to, like, is Kevin Durant traded? What is Kevin Durant traded for? Is Giannis Antetokounmpo traded? What is Giannis Antetokounmpo traded for? What do the Celtics do with their team after the very unfortunate Jason Tatum injury? Like, do they decide to make wholesale changes? Do they trade a bunch of guys? What do those guys get traded for, right? Like, a lot of this stuff all has knock-on effects. And, it's just, I think, very difficult to know what these teams are going to do. Like, another one, like, what are the Brooklyn Nets going to do? Like, are they going to be content to, because they have control of their draft again next year, they could be content to, play young players next year and draft high and, be okay having another season where they're high in the lottery, or are they going to try to speed things up? Like, there's just a lot of stuff like that that's very hard to predict right now. the amount of uncertainty and action that I think is going to happen around the league. And I think for the Jazz, some of it's going to be a matter of seeing where all that stuff plays out. But look, if it was me and you're looking at where the Jazz are at in general, like I said before, if you just look at the roster and the timelines of where Lowry is at and where the Jazz are at, it is sort of, it's I'm not going to say it's the Golden State Warriors 2 timeline situation, but it is 2 very different timelines. And, that makes for a very interesting offseason. And I think a very interesting question for Austin Ainge and Justin and Danny and everybody with the Jazz to decide, like, what is the plan going forward and how do we want to handle things? And if we decide to go in that direction, what is the return we're looking for? Like, would the Jazz want more draft picks in the future? Would the Jazz want bona fide young players? Would the Jazz want both? Like, I think all that stuff, I think, is sort of up to them to try to figure out what exactly the course they want to chart is. And again, I think a lot of it is, what are these other teams in the league going to do and what's going to happen with these other star players? Because I do think this summer has a chance to be very active across the board because there's a lot of disappointed teams and a lot of teams looking to do stuff. But we've also seen a lot of teams already empty the clip on a lot of trades. And so that makes for kind of a weird middle ground where, yeah, there might be a lot of teams itching to do stuff, but it's unclear what they have the ability to do from an asset standpoint to make a team like Utah or these other teams looking to move star players happy.
All right, before I set you loose, there's the NBA Finals that start tonight. So I will save my breakdown for you. I already gave it, so I'm not going to unpack it for you. There's no reason to do that. So before I set you loose, I know your pick. I heard it this morning on SportsCenter, but give it to our listeners. Who wins the NBA Finals, and why do you think that happens, Tim?
I like Thunder in 5. I think it's more likely to be 4 than 6, so I think 6 is possible, depending if Indiana can hit some shots and the Thunder don't, both of which are possible. Oklahoma City, I think, has got a chance to be an all-time great team going forward. They had an all-time great season this year. They have the best player in the series. They have an extraordinarily deep team that can play in virtually any way. And Indiana has been extremely impressive in these playoffs. They are a much better team than I gave them credit for during the year. However, the things that they do that make them extremely difficult for teams to play against, the speed at which they play, the depth that they have, the amount of shooting and spacing they can create on offense, the versatility they have across the board. Oklahoma City does all of those things better, and they have the best player. So and the things that Oklahoma City struggles with, the 2 main things are they foul every trip down the court. So if a team can get to the foul line, they can get some advantage there because the Thunder don't really get to the foul line themselves. And the Thunder are not a great rebounding team, but Indiana's worse. So the 2 places where you can really attack them on the boards and at the line, Indiana can't really take advantage of. So I think it's going to be a super fun series. I think Indiana has the ability, with the way they move the ball, to potentially give the Thunder some problems with their offense. And the Thunder can certainly get cold from 3. So I do think they're going to be fun, competitive games. I think in a lot of ways it could be like Thunder Heat back in 2012, where it's a competitive 5-game series and every game is pretty close, and the Heat just won 4 of them. But it's just very hard for me to see anybody beating this Thunder team. I felt that way other than Boston for most of the year. And the one other team I thought could beat them was Denver. And, the way these things go in the playoffs, like, I thought that Oklahoma City won the title in Game 5 of the second round when Lou Dort in the fourth quarter of Game 5 at home, when the Thunder were down by 8 going into the quarter and potentially on their way out of the playoffs. Lou Dort, who can either hit 8 threes in a row or miss 15 in a row, hits 3-4 threes in a row after not playing late in Game 4. We got properly benched in the whole fourth quarter, and because of that, the Thunder won that game and went on to win that series in Game 7 at home, and I think won the title because of it. And it's just a reminder that for as good as a team is, to win a title, you got to get really lucky from a health standpoint and from a on-court play standpoint. And I just don't think Indiana has the horses to really take these guys down. But I do think if you're a basketball fan, you should tune in and watch, because I think it's going to be super fun to watch, and it's 2 really fun styles of play with a bunch of exciting young players. And I think it's going to be an entertaining series, just one that I don't think has a chance to go all that long.
Well said, Tim. Thanks so much for the time on a busy day. Enjoy the game, enjoy the series, and safe travels, my friend, okay?
Anytime, Spence. Thanks for having me, man. Talk to you soon.
All right. Timmy Goodtime Bontemps from ESPN. Prior to ESPN, he was with the Washington Post and the New York Post. Get him on social media. At Tim Bontemps is where you find him. Interesting take on the Jazz current roster. I think I'm higher on Lowry and Walker and who the Jazz have if they play their better players 75, 80 games this year, which nobody does anymore, than Tim is. But some interesting perspective there. Tim stops by today, courtesy of our friends at IFA Country Stores. When the seasons change, if you're like any good coach, you'll put together your game plan for a healthy green lawn, and you'll turn to the experts at IFA. Check out their 4+ lawn care program. Everything you need to make your yard a hit. It's the ultimate lawn owner power move at IFA and IFA.coop. All right, 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. We're going back to Oklahoma City. Coming up after a quick break to catch up with Dave McMiniman. We'll do some golf with Paul Pugmire, some hockey with Belle Frazier. Little sports court on the program today. Aaron Rodgers is high speed ahead to Pittsburgh to become the new quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we're jam-packed and busy on a Thursday drive with Spence Checketts right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. Special thanks to Timmy Goodtime Bontemps for stopping by last segment live in Oklahoma City. You know, Porter, I was thinking as we were talking with Tim, I'm so impressed at the depth of talent with ESPN's NBA people. Right. I mean, we got Bontemps, we got McMahon, we got Windhorse, we got Malika, we got Shanae, we got Legs.
Legler's so good.
Oh, my God. I mean, you know, we've got Jay Reynolds, we've got Jeremy Woo, we've got Clinton Yates, we've got Chris Herring. Like, their depth, it's top heavy, but at the top, it's really good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there's well, you mentioned a dozen guys.
At least. I could keep
Tom
going.
Thibodeau couldn't even use them all.
I could keep going, but it's remarkable how many talented people they have at ESPN breaking down the NBA. Our next guest, Dave McMiniman, live in Oklahoma City. Hello, Dave. How are you?
Well, I'm not in Oklahoma City.
He got out of it.
I guess I didn't make that top 12. I guess so. I'm hanging back in LA until games 3 and 4 in Indiana.
How did you pull that off? I was praying you were in like a La Quinta Inn eating Jimmy John's in Oklahoma City or something. How'd you pull it off?
There was to not bore your listeners. There was some reporting that needed to happen out here. So I am here, and then I will go on Monday to Indianapolis, go to the heartland of America, and see where the series stands there. Hopefully we have at least a split at that point.
Let me guess. Will LeBron opt in or opt out? Nobody knows.
I just saw McMahon posting that Bontemps is zipping around town on a scooter, and I decided I didn't want to be part of that in OKC. I think bird people, they call them birds, these scooters out here, they are like the lowest form of humanity. And the fact that Tim Bontemps would engage in that while a visitor in OKC is very disappointing.
That may have been the best take you've ever had on the show, because I am completely with you, Dave. All right, let's not bury the lead. Let's start with the local stuff, as Austin Ainge has been hired as the president of basketball operations for the Utah Jazz. During his press conference media availability, Ryan Smith himself said that Austin is now calling the shots. He said it's his show. He's the loudest voice in the front office, meaning Justin Zanuck, the general manager, now reports to Austin. And Austin's dad, Danny Ainge, the CEO, also reports now to Austin, his son, which is going to be an interesting dynamic. We'll see how it plays out. But I don't know how well you know Austin, if at all. Just wanted to get your thoughts on what the Jazz decided to do, reshuffling the front office out here.
Yeah, I actually got to know him a little bit this past year. I did a story looking back at the Jason Tatum draft and how he wanted to be a Laker, and the Lakers never worked him out. And I spoke to Austin for that story, and I actually very much enjoyed kind of his personality. You know, the crux of the story was, Jason Tatum has shifted the balance in terms of the championship chase between the Lakers and the Celtics. And Austin's line was, can we even say that they're only one championship away anyway? Since when are the people of Los Angeles celebrating anything won in Minneapolis? So I enjoyed that he had that little zinger that he provided, going deep into the pettiness of the Lakers-Celtics rivalry. But obviously his reputation, of course, is that he's the son of Danny Ainge, but that he's made shrewd moves and been very smart about creating the pipeline of the main Red Claws system with the Celtics and using that in order to replenish talent around the margins. And I certainly think he would be a wonderful candidate if his name was Austin Jackson. It just happens to be that he learned from one of the best executives that we've seen, who's his father. And I think it's a very good hire by the Jazz. My initial thought, and I'll have to reach out to Justin. Hopefully everything's okay with him health-wise, and this isn't a move that was necessitated by the fact that Justin's going through the health stuff that he has been.
Yeah, and I continue to say there are only 30 GM jobs, so if you have one, you love it no matter what. I just, Justin at one point was thought to be high speed ahead to be the main decision maker in Milwaukee. That went to Horst. And then when Dennis Lindsay left here, I think most of us, including myself, figured the show was now Xanax, and it wasn't then, and it isn't now. I just wonder if at some point, and your point about his health probably is the bottom line because Ryan and Ashley and the organization really rallied behind him, and I'm told he loves living here and has lived here for quite some time. You just have to wonder if a guy is sharp and well-respected and is liked as Jay-Z at some point just wants to be the guy that calls the shots to build a roster, or maybe he's fine where his feet are at. I honestly don't know.
Yeah, I mean, generally when teams are kind of a healthy organism, there is an alignment between ownership, coaching staff, and the front office. In this case, from just looking at it, I still view this to be a healthy situation. And, so long as you believe in your ownership, which it appears, Ryan Smith is someone who's kind of done everything right since taking over that franchise. You can look at it like we're adding another smart person to the room versus I need to watch my back.
For sure. And that's why every time I've discussed it, I prefaced it with I honestly don't know, and we'll see how they work in lockstep together. All front offices have multiple voices. We were texting back and forth about this. One thing that Austin did say when asked about his philosophy on tanking is we will not do that this year, or you will not see that this year. It was interesting. So Bontep's last segment, I presented the scenario of, and the Jazz probably going to try to move off of Clarkson. Good luck. They'll probably try to move off of Collins and Sexton as well. And maybe they can now because all those contracts move into they'll be expiring deals this year in a way they haven't been prior to. But if we just operate off the roster they have with the addition of the number 5 pick and maybe the number 21 pick, maybe they find a couple of players in the second round they like. And, a guy like Lauri Markkanen actually plays 70 to 75 games, and a guy like Walker Kessler actually plays 65, 70 games and doesn't shoot 7 threes in an insulting way to be unserious about competing, along with some of the other players that have shown some signs. I'm not saying I see a team that wins 40, 45 games and sniffs the play-in, but I'm seeing a team that maybe wins 30, 35, and that puts them, Dave, right in this perilous situation where if they don't finish in the top 8, that pick goes to the team that I think is about to win the world championship. And if we're sitting here next spring and the Jazz have won 32 games and Mark Tatum pulls out the envelope at 9 and it's the Jazz, that is an epic step in the wrong direction. So how do you think they kind of dance this dance if they're not going to manipulate minutes, if they're not going to tank with the idea of also holding on to that pick? What do you think that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I texted you and Porter having seen some clips from the introductory press conference for Austin Ainge and him declaring we're not going to tank. It doesn't make sense. Now, there is a lesson to be learned that, of course, need everyone involved, fans included, and those press conferences generally are for messages to be heard by the fans, that the lottery is a lottery, and there's no direct correlation between your spot in the standings and the pick that you're guaranteed to get. And so there's a gamble there. And perhaps some of that messaging was, I recognize that this was a gut punch to go through the year that we just had and not end up with a top 3 pick. And so I'm not going to say right now that this is our plan for the next year. But we're also aware that teams, quote unquote, stealth tank. And when we talk about a Western Conference as stacked as it is, I think we talked about this last week, the Chris Finch comment that there's going to be 13 teams in the West vying for the playoffs. If you're one of the 2 teams that aren't, and the Jazz are one of the 2 teams that aren't, it behooves you to be closer to the bottom than closer to the middle. It just does. And if they are able to be sellers and get off some of those contracts that you suggested, that's exactly what they will be. They will be taking back young players and draft picks in order to, move off of Clarkson, Sexton, Collins, as you mentioned. That would be the preferred way to do so. So again, saying something in June can very much look a lot different when we start playing games in the second half of the season from January through April.
And I think it probably means, Dave, that they will kick the tires on moving off of Markkanen, who is really good and has been really good here and likes living here. And as you know, that's an important thing around here, to have a really good player that wants to stay here. But he might just be too good to fit into this plan this year of stealth tanking or whatever we're calling it. And also, I'm laughing as I say a 28-year-old might be too old for the timeline. But we were talking about this with Bontemps, like the Golden State dual timeline thing that turned out to be a little clunky. So there are a lot of big names that could be on the move. Do you think Lauri Markkanen could be one of them?
Certainly could be. And again, he has really acquitted himself well to that organization, became an all-star, has proven to be like a reliable player. Obviously, he needs to play more than 47 games like he did last year. But when he's on the court, he produces. A guy like that could fit into a variety of teams that are in contention, and so there would be value there. I certainly believe all of that. At the same time, then what is kind of the product you're selling? And again, if they truly believe in Isaiah Collier and Keontae George, Kessler, being a core to move forward with, then sure. If they don't or are unsure, it's tough to move on from a bird in the hand for two in the bush in this case, because he is a very, very good player who seems to be very content being the best player on the Jazz franchise.
All right, moving off the Jazz stuff, let's get over to what Jim Dolan and his kazoo decided to do this week with their head coach. Dave, one of the things that kind of irritates me about the media stuff and how many different voices there are how many people, like, after the fact, are like, yeah, I totally saw this coming, this, that, or whatever. And look, maybe you did. I don't know. I think this is, and I'm biased. Tom was Jeff's assistant back in the 90s, so I very much like and respect the man outside of him being a coach who I think has done a remarkable job there. I guess the way I'll pose it to you is, what's your understanding of why this decision was made? Is it in a vacuum because of what happened against Indiana? Is it player-driven with Cat behind the scenes? Is it an owner who's more interested in being a front man for a hacky band than anything else? Like, what exactly went into this decision as far as how you understand it?
Listen, the Knicks made, or had, I should say, because I can't say with certainty that they made him do this, but they had Leon Rose own this decision with the statement. In the statement, however, it goes out of his way. Leon Rose, the president of basketball operations, goes out of his way to praise Tom Thibodeau and say that he's part of our family and always will be. To me, that sounds like the statement of someone who, wink, wink, wants people to know that it was not his idea. And I do believe that Leon Rose does have autonomy over the players. So then that would make me believe it's not a player-driven decision, that this was about James Dolan, the owner. And that, if you want to talk about head-scratching moves, well, that is the MO of what James Dolan has done since being in charge of that franchise. And so that's where it makes most sense. When something doesn't make sense, you want to have it make sense, look at James Dolan. And beyond that, certainly I think the tipping point that would have made it hard for Leon Rose to defend him and to, step in front of any impetus from Dolan is the fact that he benched Cat in Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Finals. It's a guy that you traded for. He's perhaps as great as Jalen Brunson is. He's perhaps your most talented player. And I spoke to someone who was on the Minnesota staff when Bibbs coached Cat back then. and said, "Oh man!" As soon as I saw him in bench cat, I knew this would be a problem because that's what happened back in the day. There was that one game play-in game between Minnesota and Denver. It was before the play-in tournament was official. There just happened to be that season where it was the last game of the year that would determine whether the Nuggets or the Wolves get in. In the fourth quarter and crunch time of that game, Thibodeau also benched Cat in favor of Taj Gibson. And, the person I spoke to who was familiar with that Wolves team said, as soon as I saw that happen, I thought that would be a problem. However, I spoke to another league exec who said, listen, I heard whispers about Thibodeau and whether just how high the team was on him over the years. And I was still shocked and surprised to see that decision made after the run they just had. So I think my takeaway is that NBA coaching is no longer merit-based. It just isn't. It is at the whim of the owner. That's why good for the Coaches Association that everything is guaranteed money. And you could say, oh, well, why would they do this? Why is they're going to give a guy a 3-year, $30 million extension and he gets to walk out the door with that? He gets to walk out the door with that because you took away his dignity. Listen, I still think the Michael Malone decision, good for David Adelman to get that team to the second round of the playoffs and force OKC to a Game 7. But I think if you have clinched a playoff spot as the coach of a team, you should be guaranteed the chance to coach that team in the playoffs, barring anything off the court that would be untoward and perhaps invoke a moral turpitude clause. I think it's out of control right now.
Yeah, some good points in there. I was thinking about this today. Is it a sign, or maybe it has been a sign, and maybe I'm just slow to the uptake here, whether it's Michael Malone or even Taylor Jenkins, who's younger but appears to be a little bit more of an old school guy, and Tom is as old school as they come. Is it a sign that the job description has changed, where it's more about look, I'm arguing with myself as I ask you this question. It's always been about managing egos, and relationships have always been a part of it. But the days of Greg Popovich and Jerry Sloan and, some of these old school guys that are just more about results-based business approaches as opposed to coddle these young stars, is that approach simply just out the window now?
I think it's harder and harder to do because you have to establish yourself to be able to do that. So if you're a young coach coming in, one thing is that a lot of times the front offices these days are heavy-handed in allowing that new coach to pick their staff. And so from the very beginning, they're undercut in terms of having power. When they first step into the organization, it's not even their decision who's going to work for them. And then it only extrapolates from there. And the initial reporting that Shams Charania has shared on ESPN that the Knicks want someone who is adaptable and someone who's be more willing to play their bench. That doesn't sound like the resume of someone who is established because established guys say, no, I know what I'm doing. Back out of my kitchen. Let me cook. A guy who is just happy to get the opportunity kind of has no choice but to listen to the front office, to the analytic walks, whatever it may be, in order to take that input and have it affect the way they coach. And so, I am not reporting this name, but, considering the way the Phoenix hiring went with Johnny Bryant and Jordan Knott being the two finalists and Jordan Knott getting hired, and Johnny Bryant having history with the Knicks organization, I am very curious to see if someone like him is the guy who gets the job, because that would be the type of person that would kind of have to play the bench and have to be less rigid, because there is the idea of, well, I am just fortunate to have this job.
Isn't it only fair to point out that there are 6.5, maybe 7 good players on the roster? If you want your coach to play your bench, maybe don't have Campaign, Landry Shamet, and Precious Achua as 3 of the 4 best options off the bench. This is not a deep roster, Dave.
I agree with you completely, but that would require a front office to point the finger at themselves, which
Mm-hmm.
that happens about as often as I get through a radio appearance with you without trying to talk trash on one of my ESPN colleagues.
Which is literally never. All right, we'll end with a thought on the finals. Initially I was like, yeah, this doesn't feel like it's going to be close. And then I started digging into some of the stuff about the pace and the rebound percentage and free throws. And I'm like, no, now I think it's even more of a mismatch. It's just like everything Indiana can do well, Oklahoma City can also do those things well. I feel like, out of my respect for Rick Carlisle, I'll give them a game and say it's not a sweep. But how do you think this goes down, Dave, before I set you loose?
Yeah, I picked OKC in 6. Some of that was just hoping that we'd get a 6-game series after 2 5-game series the last 2 years. But as I've looked into, reading materials and some of the stat packs we've been shared at ESPN, like there's 2 numbers that completely are jumping out off the page to me. One, the Thunder have 47 wins this year by 15 points or more.
Jeez.
Between the regular season and the playoffs, the most all time NBA history. So that would suggest that we may not get close games because they're going to lead by enough. So it's not even a question in the fourth quarter. And then the second thing, with OKC having home court advantage, they are winning home playoff games this postseason run by an average of 25.5 points per game. So, it's blowout. So the only way we get a good series, in my opinion, is that Indy can split the first 2. Those 2 numbers I just shared with you would suggest that that's very unlikely. And so if it ends up being 2-0 OKC, yeah, I think we're probably going 5.
All right, my guy. Well, congratulations on manipulating the system so you could remain in Southern California for another few days. But enjoy the finals. Thanks for the time and safe travels, bud, okay?
All right. Thanks, Spence. Talk to you soon.
All right. The great Dave McMiniman covers the NBA for ESPN. Get him on Twitter at MC10 is where you find him. Dave stops by today, courtesy of our good friends at IFA Country Store. Summer vacations and warmer weather are just beyond the horizon as the days grow longer and brightly colored flowers begin making their appearance. It's time to start planning and applying Step 2 of IFA's 4+ annual lawn care program. It's designed with a blend of vital macro and micronutrients. IFA's Step 2 fertilizer promotes strong roots and vibrant colors in your yard at IFA and IFA.coop. Tip-off tonight, Game 1 of the NBA Finals featuring Oklahoma City and the Indiana Pacers is at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. It's on ABC, and, of course, the radio coverage can be found right here after we say goodnight on ESPN 700. We will switch gears. We're going to do a little golf. The PGA Tour is up in Canada this weekend. It's the RBC Canadian Open. Some fun local golf storylines on the BYU and Utah sides of things. So Paul Pugmire stops by. We'll do a little Utah Mammoth and some NHL Stanley Cup final playoff conversation with Belle Frazier. We're going to have friends with Sports Court later on, so we've got a very busy Thursday show, and it's good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. The world of professional golf has their eye on the RBC Canadian Open as the PGA Tour is at TPC Toronto at Osprey Valley, the North Course. We got the U.S. Open right around the corner, so we got a lot to do with our next guest on a Thursday afternoon, typically a Friday guest. Paul Pugmire, happy Thursday, sir. How are you?
Doing great. How about you?
I'm well. Before we get to the RBC Canadian Open, someone named, I think it's pronounced Scheffler, won the Memorial Tournament last week. Scotty Scheffler ran away from the field. Here's where I wanted to start today, because I did a little TV with our guy Dave Fox this week, and he asked me a question that I knew somebody like you would take offense to, and somebody that really knows the game of golf. He said, are we seeing this generation's Tiger Woods and Scotty Scheffler? I know that I'm not supposed to ask you that, Paul, but at what point do we start leaning into that possibility with, now that he's healthy, he just enters every tournament as such a massive favorite?
Yeah. You know, there's only one Tiger. I think we all know that. And the fact that Scotty Scheffler he's got a full foot in the door of putting up Tiger-like numbers. The fact that he's doing that does not diminish at all from Tiger Woods and his legacy, nor does it diminish what Scotty Scheffler is doing. He is putting up Tiger-like numbers, and he has been doing it now. He's really solidly in his second year of doing it. He is perhaps in his third year of doing it. It's got to be taken so seriously right now. When Scotty shows up, he is the favorite. And, you know, that was one thing that Tiger had. And you know, you have talked about how you missed that. I wish you could have seen it as well. It was a situation where he knew he was going to win, but the other players knew as well. And it really affected the whole psyche of everybody at the tournament. Scotty is getting kind of down that road right now.
So let me follow up, because you referenced this is year 2 of this Scotty run that has just been so wildly impressive. When I was doing some reading this morning, and the Tiger stuff seemed to have started like in 1999. And then his 2000 year may have been the best season anyone's ever seen. 9 wins, 3 consecutive major championships, completes the Tiger Slam the next year by winning 4 straight majors. And for all intents and purposes, it seemed to have continued until 2008, where despite his ruptured ACL, he won the U.S. Open that year. So would you characterize when Tiger was Tiger from 99 to 2007? Is that kind of the time frame we're looking at?
Yeah, it is. That is a very good time frame to look at it in. So that would have been his third year on tour. He started on the tour in 1997, and he didn't take him very long to win. No shock there. His first win came down in Las Vegas in what was I can't even remember the sponsor. Anyway, it was down in Vegas, and then he just took off from there. The 2000 year, unmatched in the modern era. Now, one of the things that made 2000 so incredibly dominant is that he played a full schedule. Ben Hogan in 1953 had a year that was statistically equally as dominant, except for one input, and that's that Hogan only played 4 tournaments. He won 3 of them. 3 of them were majors. So Hogan had a year that was conceptually as dominant. He just didn't play because he couldn't play. He was coming off of his car injury, his car wreck.
So Tony, let's do a little Tony Finau here. And you know, when you look at the leaderboard last week, he finished 5 over, but still made $115,000. So
he did.
You know, like it's great to be in a sport where you can finish tied for 31st and still walk away with a nice purse. So many missed putts, like short missed putts, so many moments where you're like, what's going on with him? And, you know, ultimately, again, when you walk away with a paycheck, I suppose you view it as a success, but he hasn't looked like himself for the most part this year. He's not in the field. I believe he's not in the field this week at the RBC Canadian Open. Part of me feels like he should be playing as much golf as he can, but that's up to him and not me. Your thoughts on where we're at with our local guy that we all kind of pull for to figure things out on tour?
A couple things. First of all, no, he's not in the field this week. He has said that he will focus on the elevated tournaments and the majors. And the reason for that ends up becoming very simple mathematically. That's where the points are to get the most points for the time you spend playing. So in addition to the good payout that he had at the Memorial last year, he got elevated points as well. That's in his plan. The other thing is Tony clearly is searching. He is looking for a place that feels right to him. And this was just stunningly evident last week at the Memorial when Tony hit a 10, 12-foot putt one-handed. Did it with his right hand. It looked very much like the one-hand drill, the right-hand drill that Tiger Woods does warming up every time. It looked very much like the right-hand, one-hand practice stroke that Nelly Korda does. Tony did it on a putt that counted. He made the putt, but the fact that he did that told me that he is searching, that he is not comfortable with what he's doing with his putting stroke, and he's looking for an answer. Now, I think it's really good that if he's emphasizing his right hand because he's a right-handed player who is a great athlete. And so, when you shoot a basketball, you do it with your dominant hand. When you throw a baseball, you do it with your dominant hand. When you roll a putt, you want to emphasize your dominant hand. So the fact that he was doing that, I think, is a positive. But the fact that he was doing that with the lights on tells me that he's searching.
So you referenced, Tiger playing a full schedule back in 2000. Last week, I asked you your thoughts on why Rory seems to be skipping events when he's playing at the top of his game, and he finally completed the career Grand Slam. My first question about Rory is, what the hell is a non-conforming driver, Paul?
Okay, this is such fun. So what happens is the drivers have thin faces that they're made of a titanium alloy, and they are designed to have what's called a rebound effect. They're a trampoline. It's a metal trampoline. And as they are hit, especially with these guys who are hitting it in the middle of the club face over and over and over, the same place, over and again, it thins out the face ever so slightly, microscopically, but it thins out even more so, and it increases the rebound effect. It increases the trampoline action as the face becomes thinner. And so what they're testing is the amount of rebound effect that is created with the face becoming thinner. And these are measures that are highly regulated by the USGA club conformity rules. So now just to take the thought one step further, because to its conclusion, as the face thins, ultimately it will crack. You'll collapse the face. And the really strong players will collapse a face that's not even all that thin. Fishburne carries an extra driver head in his bag because he knows he can collapse a face at any time. He's that strong. But Scheffler had played this driver for more than a year. Practices a lot, plays a lot, hits it on the middle of the club face every time. And the club face on his driver became thinner, which increased the rebound effect, increased the trampoline, and so his driver ultimately became non-conforming. It just means he needs to put a new driver in play. But this is something that the PGA Tour is grappling with, and they haven't figured it out yet.
So I found it interesting listening to Rory's media availability, where it was kind of a two-tiered approach, where he's like, Scotty's news is not mine to break, but hey, let me go ahead and break the news that Scotty's driver failed as well. It was kind of a weird way to approach it. The problem, Rory, is Scotty put a new driver in his bag and he won the damn tournament. So, ultimately, okay, I get it that Scotty's driver failed too, but he figured it out. Let me ask you this. Sometimes it appears like Rory, who obviously deserves all of our respect as such a generationally special player, just turns into a whiner. And sometimes it's a little bit off-putting. And we've had more than a handful of tense interactions between Rory McIlroy and the media. And obviously, I'm on the media side of things, but I also acknowledge that the media at times can get a little bit exhausting. I actually thought Shane Lowry, kind of under the radar in his sneaky way a couple of months ago now, brought up some really good points. And I talk about this in the NBA all the time. Like, if I was an NBA player and 2 minutes after the worst gut-wrenching loss I ever suffered, somebody put a microphone in front of my hands, I'd be fined a microphone in front of my face, I'd be fined every week, every game. And so for Shane to come out and say, look, I just finished my round. I played horribly. I don't want to talk to you. I get that. All right. I understand that. But what do you make of, and then there's the Morikawa stuff where I can't remember which tournament he just said, I don't owe you guys anything. So what do you make of kind of what I perceive to be a little bit of a tense few months between PGA Tour players and media members who cover the tour?
You know, everything you say is true, and it's both. It's interesting and amusing while at the same time a little exasperating. But the thing with Rory is Rory sometimes, and he knows this about himself. And I want to come back to something else he said in this same interview. He knows that he has a tendency to speak his mind and to just start riffing and to not put a lot of filters up. And so he creates some of this tension by going down paths and opening doors that other people won't go down or won't open. And now now he's standing there in the middle of the path and the door is open and he's got to keep going on it. He just creates some of this tension because of the nature of the way he engages with these questions when they come his way. And ultimately, recognizing that is why he chose not to engage with the media. One of the reasons why he chose not to engage with the media at the PGA Championship, because there were some things going on, the failed driver test that he knew about, that ultimately Scotty said, yeah, my driver failed. And so Scotty broke the news himself. But Rory didn't. He says, look, I know I'm capable of saying things I'm going to regret, and I don't want to do that. So this week I'm not going to say anything. And then next week he did say more, and now we're talking about it.
All right, let's move over now to the tournament that's going on right now, the RBC Canadian Open. Let's start with the track. I don't know if you've been to this one. It feels like you have at some point either been or played most. But what do you know about TPC Toronto at Osprey Valley?
So it is one of the TPC network, owned and operated, built by the PGA Tour, and so they wanted this to be in the rota, in the rotation for the Canadian Open as it moves around to different great courses up there in Canada. It is a TPC design, which immediately means it's built to accommodate a big crowd. It also is a course that was designed with a very significant and intentional nod to the tradition of great parkland courses in Canada. Glen Abbey, Royal Montreal, these great courses that have been a part of the Canadian Open for years. And it is a worthy test. It'll be interesting to see what kind of numbers these guys put up, but it's going to be a very good test. And this is one of the great tournaments of the year, each year. It always has been sandwiched in and around the U.S. Open and the British Open, and some ways that's unfortunate because it is such a great tournament, and its history of champions are so great. But sometimes it gets the Canadian Open gets overlooked a little bit because it's so close to the other majors this time of year.
Is that the main reason? And I don't want to be disrespectful because I do see names like Shane Lowry. I do see names like Nick Taylor, who won the event not too long ago. Wyndham Clark is in the field. But a lot of the big dogs not in the field. Rory is playing; he's not playing well. But Justin Rose. I don't want to be disrespectful, but it doesn't seem like a lot of the big dogs are in this event. Why is that?
This year, it's because of the way it came on the schedule. The week between an elevated event in the Memorial at Muirfield Village, and then next week the U.S. Open at Oakmont. And so if anybody needs a breath, most players are going to take it this week. Rory, on the other hand, he said at the start of the year that he was emphasizing national championships, and this is one of those. So Rory is there because he wants to win the Canadian Open. Again, he's won it before. But the Canadian Open has a marvelous history. You look back over the people who have won it, and there's just this big list of World Golf Hall of Famers who have won the Canadian Open. I mean, my favorite Canadian Open story actually goes back a long way. 1971, Lee Trevino won 3 national championships in a 20-day period. He won the U.S. Open, the Canadian Open, and the British Open in less than 3 weeks. And then, Tiger Woods hit one of the greatest shots ever hit at Glen Abbey when he hit that 6-iron from 213 stupid yards over the water to the pin cut on the right corner of the green to win the Canadian Open when he won up there. And yet there is a remarkable name that's missing in the history of the Canadian Open, and that's Jack Nicklaus. He finished second 7 times. The Canadian Open was Jack Nicklaus's kryptonite.
Interesting stuff. Thorbjorn Olesen and Cristobal del Solar, 2 golfers I'm super familiar with, are at the top. Olesen is in the clubhouse after carding a 61, and del Solar is 9 under through 15. Cameron Champ went low. Jake Knapp went low. There are a lot of players that have been able to go low, but none of them are the big names. I would imagine you know about the 2 golfers at the top, right? Olesen and del Solar, yeah?
Yeah, a little bit. Olesen, of course, a DP World Tour player. Del Solar comes down of Colombia. Real interesting story there. He shot a 57, I believe, at a Corn Ferry event down in South America, but it was on a pretty short course. But the fact is, you got to hit a lot of good shots regardless of the course to go that low. It'll be interesting to see how they continue, how they hold on to this kind of scoring for 4 days. It's fun to see Cameron Champ going low again. He, of course, has a Utah connection. He won the Corn Ferry event 4 or 5 years ago now when it was at Oak Ridge. So he's got a little Utah in his blood. But it will be interesting to see how this plays out. We just don't have good data on this golf course and what these guys are going to do with it.
We've got a couple local golfers, even though Tony's not in the event. And I just want to let you know that Mike Weir has a Canadian flag next to his name, Paul. I know we're supposed to say he's from Draper.
Okay,
I know we're supposed to.
Know that.
So does Mike get? Is he able just to play in this tournament as long as he wants as a result of his accomplishments and because he's a Canadian? Like, how does he qualify for something like this?
There is golf royalty in Canada, and then on the next step above, there is Mike Weir.
Gotcha.
It's that simple.
Okay. Mike, at this point, he's 1 over, so McIlroy's right there as well. And then Zach Blair, even par. So give me your thoughts on what you're hoping to see from our 2 locals in the tournament.
Well, obviously, the main drill here is got to make the cut, because with the cut comes a check and points, and Zach Blair is in desperate need of both of those. Zach qualified for the U.S. Open.
He did, yeah.
Down to the longest day of golf on Monday. He'll be at Oakmont. And so that's really fun to see. Not terribly shocking. Zach has qualified for the U.S. Open in the same way before, but it's really cool.
I'm glad you brought that up. What is that? Like, everyone kept saying, like, even Dave asked me on TV, he's like, hey, did you watch the longest day? I'm like, no, it was Monday. I had to work. I don't know how people, like, what are you talking about? What is that? What exactly is that, Paul?
So the U.S. Open has a qualifying system that anybody with a USG handicap index of 1.4 or below can enter to try to qualify for and play in the U.S. Open. About 9,000 people do that, and there's a series of 30-some local qualifiers that are held, and out of those local qualifiers, people then who succeed at the local, they move on to the regional qualifier. The regional qualifier is 36 holes. 1 day, 36 holes. And there are 11 of them held around the country, and in Canada as well. And they start at sunup on the East Coast, and they go until sundown on the West Coast. And because of that, it is the longest day of golf, and you have 11 locations that are holding these 36-hole tournaments, and out of which the final qualifiers for the field in the U.S. Open are determined. And there's always really great players who are going through this qualifier system to get to the U.S. Open. And every once in a while, Lucas Glover, Jeff Ogilvy, you'll see somebody come through this qualifying system and go win the U.S. Open.
All right, before we get to because we'll talk U.S. Open next week at Oakmont. So before we get to what's coming up on the show and some local storylines, I don't know if I didn't know this or I just forgot, but Phil Mickelson only needs the U.S. Open to complete the Grand Slam, right? I mean,
Yeah.
For some reason I thought he had won it because he went on that tear, and he's won 6 majors. He said recently this is probably his last chance. So give me your thoughts on what's kind of a fun storyline heading into the U.S. Open next week.
Oh, Phil is so easy to love and to cheer for, and even though he can be exasperating on occasion, but no, his game is nowhere near U.S. Open quality. He's not going to be in the mix next week. He has finished second 4 times, most famously at Winged Foot. He needed a bogey on the last hole in order to win the U.S. Open, and he failed. He made double bogey and he lost the U.S. Open, and he did it by being Phil. He hit his driver into the junk, and then he hit the wrong shot. Instead of just going sideways to the fairway and playing for bogey, he tried to hit a hero shot and gave away the U.S. Open on the 72nd hole. Things like that. The U.S. Open, clearly, it's been Phil's kryptonite in the same way the Canadian Open was the same for Jack Nicklaus. No, he's not going to win the U.S. Open this week. He will be one of many other great players, Sam Snead, Byron Nilsson, Arnold Palmer, Tom Watson, Lee Trevino, who all end up one short of a career Grand Slam.
Well, let me follow up about Phil real quick, because he also hinted during this media availability that the end of his playing career in the Live Golf League might not be too far away. He said he's going to keep competing as a playing captain of this team of his as long as he's not hurting the team, but also kind of insinuated that this could be close to the end for him. He's 55, so it's not like he's 80, but of course he's not 35 anymore. Do you leave any space for some sort of wild twist to this crazy story where Phil maybe walks away from Live and ends up back on the tour?
Whew. Wouldn't that be interesting? Boy, there'd have to be a whole lot of things fall in place, I think, for that to happen, because a lot of bridges have been burned and a lot of personal hurts have been experienced on both sides of this whole thing. However, Phil Mickelson has a history and a legacy like very, very few other people. If those hurts could be healed for anyone, Phil would be the guy. I'd love to see something like that. I really would. It would be hard to get there from here.
All right, Paul, before I set you loose, enlighten us with some of the local storylines you'll be discussing on the radio program tomorrow.
It is championship season in Utah golf. The Utah Junior Golf Association is conducting its junior state junior am this week. They'll have a winner tomorrow, and the UGA is conducting the Mid-Am Championship down in St. George at Entrada. That's today and tomorrow. They'll have a winner tomorrow as well. We're going to bring it all to you on Utah Golf Radio, ESPN 700 on Saturday morning.
Paul, thank you, sir. Have a great show and a great weekend. I appreciate your time, okay?
Thank you, Spencer.
All right, time now for our PGA Tour Uinta Golf leaderboard update. The PGA Tour is up north in Canada at the RBC Canadian Open. TPC Toronto at Osprey Valley. It's their north course. And Thorbjorn Olesen has the lead at 9 under par. He is actually in the clubhouse after carding 61. Cristobal del Solar is 9 under through 15. So he has a chance to take the lead before he's done in 3 holes. Cameron Champ, 8 under. Jake Knapp is 7 under. Rasmus Højgaard at 6 under. Taylor Pendrith and Alex Smalley, in addition to Paul Peterson and Danny Willett. 5 under par. Shane Lowry just carded a birdie, so he's now at 5 under, as is Bob McIntyre. Tony Finau is not in the field, but Zach Blair is, and he's even par. Canada's Mike Weir. I know we're supposed to say he's from Draper. He's not. He's from Canada. He's at 1 over par. So those are our two local players playing. Rory McIlroy back in this field, but he's at 1 over after carding a 71, so not a great day for him. You went to golf. Check out their Callaway, Titleist, TaylorMade Ping, and Bushnell as well. Don't miss out on the Bushnell Torv 6-shift laser rangefinder. Now $70 off. And the Torv 6 now $50 off. Check them out at worldwidegolfshop.com or stop by any of their 5 Utah Uinta Golf locations today. All right, we got 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. We shift gears. Coming up on the other side, we'll do some Utah Mammoth and some NHL Stanley Cup conversation with Belle Frazier. Our friends from Sports Court stop by from Handy and Handy. We'll get back to the NBA Finals and some Jazz off-season storylines in the 5 o'clock hour of the show. Then we say goodnight at 6, and time for the NBA Finals. Game 1, you can hear it right here on ESPN 700. We got game one of the NBA Finals tonight on our radio station. You can hear that about 30 minutes after we say goodnight at 6:30. So we'll get back to some of that conversation in the 5 o'clock hour. NHL Stanley Cup Final started last night. Game one, Edmonton was able to get it done in overtime. It was an awesome game. Such a grueling tournament. We'll do some hockey now with our friend Belle Frazier from the Salt Lake Tribune on a Thursday afternoon. Belle, happy Thursday. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for your time. What'd you make of game one last night, and who do you like in the series?
It was one of the most entertaining games we've had all NHL playoffs, let alone the series. Both teams know each other really well. It's a rematch of last year's Stanley Cup Final, and I think it was really important for Edmonton to get game one at home because everyone knows if you give the Panthers an inch, they'll take a mile, especially winning on the road. They've been really good on the road throughout the playoffs. So defending home ice is huge. And also, Leon Draisaitl is one of the biggest stars in this series. He didn't score one goal in last year's Stanley Cup Final, and he had two last night, including the game-winning goal in double overtime. So I think you're going to see a different Edmonton Oilers team this time around. They're out for redemption. It's hard to think Connor McDavid and his crew, let a loss in a Game 7 or whatever game it is, let the Stanley Cup slip out of their fingers again. But on the flip side, the Florida Panthers are that good. They could have won last night easily as well, and they have a different kind of depth this year too. Their third line has been one of their best lines throughout the playoffs. So I'm going to go with Edmonton just because the redemption arc, but I would not be surprised at all if Florida pulled it off. It should be a good series, though, if last night was the preview.
Do you think we'll get 6 or 7 games? I mean, I've been bemoaning the fact both in pro basketball and pro hockey, neither of the conference finals went 7, and there really is nothing like a Game 7 in the Stanley Cup playoffs, certainly in the final. Do you think we're going to get 7 of these, Belle?
I'll have to think it goes at least 6 because they're so evenly matched, and as far as we know, there's not major injuries. Obviously, Hyman's out for the Oilers, and the guys who are out, but it seems like both sides are holding up pretty well. So without, any big losses in terms of personnel, I can't imagine it doesn't go 6, but we'll see. It's always when you predict something that the opposite happens, so who knows?
I'm going to be irresponsible here. Sam Bennett's a free agent. 2 goals last night. A player like that, a veteran player with a Stanley Cup title in his back pocket, type of player that maybe the Utah Mammoth could look at in free agency with that $20-ish million at their disposal?
Yeah, I definitely think it's something they look at. I've kind of been high on Sam Bennett, honestly, throughout this. I think that's more of the type of player that they need, not only because he's a center and he's been in the top 6 on a Stanley Cup winning team, like you said, but he has real grit to him. He's controversial. He's had some hits and caused some concussions that people really aren't happy about, which is completely understandable. You want to keep the players safe, but he plays with an edge and he's physical, and not that he's crazy, but I think he just has a little bit of that, like fighter mentality. That, not to say Utah's fully lacking, but I think he'd hold them accountable to a different level and also make them harder to play against. People do not want to play against Sam Bennett at all when he gets on the ice, and that's something you usually see in Utah's bottom 6. Guys are, it's hard to play against the Lawson Krause, Josh Doan, Jack McBain line, but to have someone of that caliber up front would be great. And like you said, he's able to produce. I do think the price tag, because of the season he's had in the playoffs he's had, is going up. A lot of NHL insiders have said that teams would be willing to offer him $10 million AAV, which I don't think Utah would do for Sam Bennett, given, his age and also the players he's surrounded with in Florida definitely help him. He won't be playing with, Carter Verhaeghe and Matthew Tkachuk in Utah. So I don't think they go at that price tag, but I definitely think it's someone you look into, you make a couple calls, and that's definitely on their radar.
Any other, and again, it's so early in the process, and we'll do draft here in a moment, but any other, I'm sure you've reviewed the free agency list like I have, and, of course, Sam is top of mind because he's playing in the Stanley Cup final. I think the big name everyone's talking about is Mitch Marner. I'm not sure that, he's only 28, but maybe he's too high of a name for what Utah would look to do. Any other names you want to throw out there that Bill and his staff could look at to bring in to help this team take that next step?
Yeah, I mean, regarding Mitch Marner, I personally am not on the Mitch Marner train just for Utah. I mean, it's crazy to say don't be interested in Mitch Marner. If he came here, I'm sure he would be great. No one's turning down an 100-point player who has just the raw talent that he does. But I can't imagine that it's Bill Armstrong's style to wrap up $14 million for 7 or 8 years in Mitch Marner. I think that Utah would be much better getting someone bigger, more physical, a little bit more rough around the edges, who still has that scoring touch and comes at a lower price tag. And there are guys like that. I think Brock Besser from the Vancouver Canucks, he's going to be a UFA. He's 28 years old, right wing. I believe he had 50 points and 25 goals this regular season. And of note, he shares an agent with Nick Bukestad. Nick Bukestad's a UFA, but he spent last year in Utah, and he raved about the team, the ownership, in his exit interviews. He said it was the best place he's been, especially for his family, too. So you have to think that Besser's agent kind of has that in the back of his mind, and his last contract had a $6.65 million AAV, so, a lot more affordable. He's going to get paid higher than that this summer, but more affordable than a Marner. Also, you look at Nikolai Ehlers from the Winnipeg Jets. I think that's another consistent, scorer. I think he's had 20-plus goal seasons for a majority of his NHL career. Yeah, 8 of his 10 years in the NHL. He was on the President Trophy winning team this year with the Winnipeg Jets, and he's coming off a 7-year, $42 million contract. So again, more in Utah's range and could just add that back-breaking scoring touch. And then this is long-winded, but I think maybe under the radar is someone like Ryan Donato from the Chicago Blackhawks. He's a center, and he was one of the only bright spots for them this year. I imagine they tried to keep him because of the impact he had, but he was only on a $4 million a year for 2 years. So he's not probably that top 2 center that Utah's looking for, but if they wanted a little bit more depth down the middle, they could look at that. But yeah, Bill Armstrong's very creative, and I have a feeling that the biggest thing Utah gets this summer might be through trade and not even through free agency. So we'll see what he does, but those are some of the main names kind of floating around the NHL market right now.
Okay, Belle, for our listeners, totally not for me, but only for our listeners, tell us what an entry-level contract is and what it means.
Yeah, are you referring to Simashev and Boot?
Yes, and Gabe Smith, but Belle, for our listeners, because I totally could break it down, but I don't feel like it, so you go ahead.
Yeah, so they signed a bunch of guys to entry-level contracts last week. The biggest names are Dmitry Simashev and Daniel Boot, who were drafted in the first round by the Arizona Coyotes a few years ago, and they were playing in the KHL over in Russia, so that's very exciting. So they were signed to entry-level contracts, and an ELC is entry-level contract. It's a 2-way contract for players who are signed as rookies, so they haven't been in the NHL yet. It allows them to be sent back and forth between the AHL without having to clear waivers. So the teams, if they want them to go develop with the Tucson Roadrunners next year, they don't have the fear of putting them on waivers and having them be claimed by any other team. Once you're out of your entry-level contract or have played a specific amount of games in the NHL, if you get put on waivers, anyone can claim you. That's what happened with Nick DeSimone. The New Jersey Devils put him on waivers, and Utah picked him up. So it just allows them to sign an NHL contract, play with the main club, but also if they need more time in the developmental league, they're able to go to Tucson or whatever the respective team is to have that time. And they're cost efficient, all under $1 million. For Simashev and Boot, they both signed, I think it was $850, or the AAV was $950,000, but that was with a bonus. So if you think about guys like Logan Cooley and Dylan Gunther, were on their entry-level contracts still last year, 2 of the highest point getters, but since they're usually 3-year deals, if you sign your top prospects to entry-level contracts, they produce for you at a low price until you eventually have to re-sign them. We saw the Gunther extension. You're going to see a Logan Cooley extension, but yeah, those are the types of contracts that the Mammoth kind of got squared away this week, and Utah fans should be excited. It sounds like Simashev and Boot will be at development camp, training camp, and have a pretty good chance of making the roster this season.
You referenced DeSimone. Since you and I last spoke, 1 year, $800,000 contract. So what are your thoughts on this transaction?
I I love it. I'm really happy for Nick DeSimone just from, a human being side. He was one of the best guys to talk to as a media member. Super open, honest, and also just, kind, doesn't have an ego to him. But that's a story of grit and determination. He hadn't played an NHL game this season yet when he got claimed off of waivers in January from the New Jersey Devils. He was on an expiring contract. He came into Utah as a depth defenseman. He could have been sent down to the Tucson Roadrunners, but he beat out Juuso Valimaki and Vladislav Kolyachonok, who eventually got traded to the Pittsburgh Penguins, for that seventh defensive role. He beat out two guys who already had standing in Utah for that position. And then when Utah had injuries, he very seamlessly went into the lineup. And he's not flashy. He's not trying to do too much. He was consistent. He was predictable. He was responsible. And he's 30, I believe. So it's not like he's inexperienced. And that's what Coach Andre Torini always said. Like, Nick DeSimone knows how to take care of business at the rink, away from the rink. So I think for them, it's more of an insurance policy. He's probably not going to play every night. He might spend some time in the AHL. But it's good to have that defensive depth and have someone that if you need to stop the bleeding because of injuries or just settle the back end down. You have him. It's only 1 year. It's a cost-efficient deal, $800,000. And I think it shows the intention Bill Armstrong has used when he brings these guys in. He got Nick DeSimone for nothing. They didn't have to trade for him. His scouts and his staff did a good job watching the waiver wire, what players were on it, how they could fit in Utah. Were able to bring him over, and now they signed him for under $1 million. So I think that's just good work from the entire organization and good for him, too. Good for Nick DeSimone to be able to stick around for another year.
Just a few weeks away from the NHL draft, and in year one of their existence, the Utah Mammoth received luck that the Utah Jazz have not received in 50 years. So a lot of people excited to see what happens with this top 4 pick. So two-part question. First part is, if they hold on to 4, who do you deem as best case scenario for them to draft? And the second part, I've got your Twitter pulled up. Is there a legitimate chance that they utilize this as a bargaining chip in a trade that could net something bigger?
Yeah, well, I think the good news for Utah Mammoth fans is you can't really go wrong if you're in the top 5 of the NHL draft, especially this year, because a majority of the forwards in the top 9 even are centers. And it's no secret, most NHL teams are looking for a center, but Utah definitely is looking for a number 2 center to go behind Logan Cooley eventually. So that's a lot of the guys. And I think someone that's been linked to Utah that fans like a lot and scouts say that kind of fits the Utah mold is Caleb Desnoyers. Porter Martone isn't a center, but he has that size, that scoring ability. He's a right wing, so he's in there. Anton Frondell is a center. He had a good season playing professional hockey in Sweden. Michael Misa, obviously, I think Utah would jump at, but it's likely he's going to go in the first 3 picks. So he's kind of outside of the picture, I would say. But the NHL scouting combine is this week where the players meet with every organization. They go through interviews and they all get physically tested. And it was reported that Michael Misa did go out to dinner with the Utah Mammoth front office. So that's something to think about, as well as James Higgins, who was the consensus number 1, overall pick a year ago. He was super highly touted. Everyone kind of thought he would be first overall, and his stock kind of dropped this season. He was in the NCAA playing college hockey for Boston College, but he's still a legitimate, number 1, number 2 center. I actually got to talk to him a few weeks ago. There's a story about that in the Tribune, but he has a really good head on his shoulders, and all of his coaches were saying if they had even the number 1 pick in the NHL draft, they'd go with Higgins. So, like I said, a bunch of centers. I think the one thing they're probably going to lean more towards is size, just because Cooley, Keller, a lot of guys in their top 6 are on the smaller side. So I would say Caleb Desnoyers or Porter Martone, but I don't know. I think Higgins could sneak in there. And like I said, you can't really go wrong. And then what was the second part of your question? Sorry.
Is there, well, real quick, thank you for saying Caleb's last name for me, because I almost said it and I would have completely destroyed it. The second part of the question is the conversation about them using 4 as a chip in a trade. How viable is that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely viable. And Bill Armstrong came out and he said that, we talked to him 10 minutes after they got the 4th overall pick, and he said, that's an avenue we're always going to look at. That's how they've gotten a lot of their bigger players. There was a couple draft picks in the Sergachev trade. It obviously wasn't 4th overall. That carries a lot more weight, but he's done it before. And I think the biggest difference here is the teams picking within the top 5, top 7, top 9 weren't 7 points out of the playoffs last year. They weren't 1 to 2 players away from being a contending team. And Utah was supposed to pick 14th overall. They got really lucky winning that second sequence and jumping up 10 points. So they're not in the position to be rebuilding with a top pick anymore. They're coming out of a rebuild. So I could see Bill Armstrong knowing that it's probably going to take 2 to 3 years for even a 4th overall pick to fully pan out and have that NHL fluency that you would want, and maybe you bundle the 4th pick with someone who didn't pan out for Utah, like Matthias Michelli or a couple prospects in Tucson or another roster player to get someone who is NHL tested, who is a top 6 scoring winger or center, and who can come in and have an immediate impact, because Utah's in win now mode. They want to make the playoffs next year. They want to keep pushing, and you could argue that trading it for someone that's been in the league for a few years, that has established themselves, would work. And there are a lot of teams in the draft order that would like to trade up. You look at the Bruins or the Buffalo Sabres. So I definitely think it's in the realm of possibility, but I also think it'll have to be the perfect deal. I don't think Bill Armstrong is going to let go of that pick just to get someone that might work in the top 6. It'll have to be a really good fit, but yes, 100%. I don't think anyone should rule that out until that draft pick has a Utah Mammoth jersey on after they call his name.
Let me throw this scenario at you, and maybe there's nothing here, but Neil Smith joined us yesterday, and he brought up the Hagens kid, the James Hagens kid, because he's a strong Islander. He's from Long Island. And so Neil floated out the potential of the Islanders taking the hometown kid at 1. And a lot of what I've read, Bell, and you tell me, this Matthew Schaefer kid is thought to be among the best prospects, and some mocks have him at 1, but he is a defenseman. If Schaefer's there at 4, if the Islanders go Hagens 1, then Misa 2, and maybe it's Porter 3. If Schaefer's there at 4, does the Utah Hockey Club look at him?
I don't think so. One, I think who knows? Because the draft board changes in a second based on what teams pick. I think there's close to a 0% chance that Matthew Schaefer drops to 3, let alone 4. But I also think Utah's pretty set defensively for now. I mean, their top 6 defensemen, they all have locked up for the next at least 1 to 3 years. They extended Ian Cole. They extended Ole Mata. Obviously, John Marino, Sergachev, Jersey. They extended last year. Michael Kessering's still there. And then in Tucson, too, they have Maverick Lamrud. They have Artem Duda. They have Dmitry Simashev, who's coming in, is going to fight for a top 4 defensive position. So I don't think that's their need. Everyone says you go for the best player available, and probably at that time, if he was available, Schaefer would be the best one. But I think Utah desperately needs a top forward more than it needs a defenseman. And it's interesting. Yeah, I think the hometown thing definitely probably plays in for Hagens because he wants to be an Islander. And I think that's something teams look for. They want their draft pick to be excited to play for their organization, but I don't know if it's enough to, throw away probably a generational defenseman like Schaefer.
All right, Bell, before I say you lose, I'm going to tie a little NBA topic into the conversation. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you about the NBA, but I'm going to draw a little parallel. I'm going to draw a little parallel to see if there's anything here because, as we watch the NBA playoffs and the finals are about to start tonight, you watch a team like Oklahoma City who resides in the West where the Jazz reside, and you realize just how far away the Jazz are from being close to the top teams in the NBA. As you watch the Stanley Cup final and as you watch teams like Florida and Edmonton, and you try to draw some sort of parallel between where the Utah, oh my gosh, I've been doing so well, the Utah Mammoth are now, and, the top teams in the league. Do you see a sizable gap, or do you see, a team that's not too far away from throwing punches with the best teams in pro hockey?
Sizable, for sure. I think sizable, but it was actually funny. You're talking NBA. I had Andy Larson, the famous Andy Larson, on the podcast today. That'll come out tomorrow. And we actually talk about this, kind of comparing the NHL and NBA and where the Jazz and Mammoth are respectively. But we talked about and we said there's a really big difference between a team in the NHL that makes the first round. And it's great to make the playoffs, great to compete in the first round. But once you get past then and obviously get past the second round, those are the big dogs. And I think you even saw it in the second round, and the fact that the Colorado Avalanche were eliminated in the first round, like that shows the type of competition. And I think Utah's on its way. I don't think they are going to be able to size up to someone like the Florida Panthers or the Edmonton Oilers in a playoff series in the next 2 years. but I don't think it's as far away as the Jazz. But yeah, watching the playoffs, it's hard to watch as players and management, I'm sure, because you want to be in it, but it's also very informative because you see what works and what's the buildup of these teams to make it to the finals. And I think there's a lot of holes for Utah in respect to that in terms of how Edmonton and Florida look. So definitely a sizable gap, but you look at the entire league, there's a sizable gap between Edmonton and a majority of teams in the NHL, So I don't think it's I don't know, not that big of a downfall, but no, I don't think they could hold up against those teams yet. I do think it'll happen sooner rather than later, though.
Bell, it is not the famous Andy Larson. At most, it is the infamous Andy Larson that we all tolerate. That's what you're allowed to use on the show, okay?
My bad, yeah.
I tease. Hey, thanks so much for the time. Great stuff as always, and have a great week, okay?
You too. Thanks.
All right. Belle Frazier covers the Utah Mammoth for the Salt Lake Tribune, has her own podcast. If you're looking for excellent Utah Mammoth coverage and content, at Belle Frazier 1 is where you find her on her social media channels. She's done a great job in her first year on the beat for the Trib. Appreciate her time today. All right, before we catch a break, we welcome in Ryan from the Dish Professionals. Give him a call at 801-424-DISH. Save a grip of money on a bunch of different things. What's going on, Ryan?
This is such a killer promotion. Listen, if you haven't heard my spots, you've got to listen to this. Dish has got the 2-year promotion, which we've been running for a while, which is 2 years worth of credits. Price is guaranteed not to change. Throw in movie channels. But now we have an offer where we can give you service for 3 months free. And, guys, this is awesome because this will save you a ton of cash. This is almost as good as the $500 gift cards that Dish mailed out. You possibly could have one of those also. If you didn't see it in the mail, well, just call us and we'll check and see if you're on the list. And we can get that attached to the promotion also. Listen, this is the opportunity you've been waiting for. If you're paying for cable, you got that oversized bill or DirecTV, that bill just creeps up and creeps up. Guys, you're going to save not just a few $100. We're talking thousands. Plus, you get a few months free or a $500 gift card. It is an awesome, awesome opportunity. And to get the best, biggest, fastest DVR out there, the Hopper, with the Hopper Plus technology, get full access to all your streaming, all with one remote, all the biggest DVR, and get the best price, too. Call us, 424-DISH. Also, ask about our great internet options we have. Lots of promotions right now and lots of deals. I got a half a dozen different internet providers. Pretty much you name it, I got it. I can hook you up with that. And prices are from $35 to $50, $55 a month. Call us, 424-DISH, 801-424-3474.
All right, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Professionals. We have some breaking news before we catch a break. According to Shams Charania, BYU coach Kevin Young has signed a new long-term contract extension with the program. Of course, coming on the heels of a Sweet 16 run and the arrival of potential number 1 pick A.J. DeBenza. Confirmed by BYU, Kevin Young has signed a new long-term contract extension. There were some rumors that with the vacant Phoenix Suns coaching job, they may have been interested. Of course, that went to Coach Ott, who was an assistant in Cleveland last year. So BYU has locked up Kevin Young long-term. Little breaking news on a Thursday. We'll catch a break, and we'll do some Sports Court coming up on the other side right here on ESPN 700. It is Sports Court time. We do it every Thursday with our friends over at Handy and Handy. No Garrett today, but my man Preston stops by on a Thursday afternoon. Preston, happy Thursday, sir. How are you?
Hey, Spence. Good. How are you doing?
I'm well. I appreciate your time. Let's dig into it today. It's a new lawsuit has been filed against Chiefs Rashee Rice over this Dallas car crash that has caused a lot of problems for him and, of course, was a tragic situation. So fill us in with all the latest.
Yeah, it has caused a lot of problem for him. You know, Rashee Rice, didn't know much about him, but apparently he was a pretty good rookie receiver. Had the most playoff catches of any rookie in NFL history. Well, following the big Super Bowl win last year, 2024, in March of 2024, our guy Rashee Rice and his buddy Theo Knox, SMU teammate of his, they leased a couple of luxury vehicles, one a Lamborghini and another a Corvette, and they're flying along at high speeds, recorded at 119 miles per hour, and one of them lost control, hit a median, and this sets into motion a bunch of collisions involving 6 different cars. And so aside from this happening, our guy Rashee and Theo, you know what they do? They jump out of the car and they scram, and reported that people were stuck in their cars trying to get out, yelling for help, and Rashee, he leaves the scene of the accident. Well, immediately following this, he is caught. They track him down, and he comes out with a statement. He says, "I take full responsibility for my part in this matter and will continue to cooperate with the necessary authorities. I sincerely apologize to everyone impacted by the accident." Well, the first thing that happens is he is criminally charged with, number one, felonies, aggravated assault, collision causing serious injury, and 6 more counts. Probably they're just kind of specific collision causing various injuries. Well, the first, in addition to that, the next thing that happens is 2 civil lawsuits are filed against Rashee for 2 injured individuals, them claiming physical and mental injuries. I don't know a lot about those lawsuits, but those were filed right on the heels within a month of this happening. Then we're kind of forget about it, and here we go a year later, and a mother, Kayla Quinn, and her son have filed a 3rd lawsuit against Rashee, claiming damages. And these are civil lawsuits where people have to go in and they have to make allegations, but they also have to prove their allegations. The first allegation they need to prove is liability. And I think our guy Rashee is going to have a real hard time really in any defense in the criminal or in this for the liability, because this was all caught on video. So in a civil lawsuit, then we move to the next phase, what's called damages. And so these 3 lawsuits and this new one, the mother and son have to prove their damages. They're alleging mental and physical injuries, which probably is accompanied by medical treatment and medical bills, potentially other damages like lost wages, that type of thing. But Rashee, it came to my mind was, well, I hope Rashee, when he leased this luxury vehicle, that he was smart to, and I'm sure they required it, but I hope he was smart to have a big insurance policy on that, because otherwise, if he gets hit with an award or a jury verdict, he's going to be on the hook personally for this. And so we'll see what happens in these.
So I read the Zion Williamson filing when it came out. And look, obviously, these are accusations and everyone deserves due process. And so we'll see how it plays out. But what she is alleging is really disturbing. So Zion Williamson accused of rape and a number of other things in a newly filed lawsuit. Preston, fill us in.
Yeah, so again, this is a civil lawsuit. And, when a civil lawsuit's filed, again, we just talked about the Rashee Rice case, but this is a civil lawsuit alleging sexual assault and rape. And the lawsuit details a lot of things. She alleges an infliction of emotional distress. She's claiming damages of $18 million to $50 million. That's 50. That's kind of weird, that's come out with those. A lot of times you just put in a jurisdictional statement that gets you over the hump to get you into court. But as you mentioned, she comes out with some pretty serious allegations about strangulation and physical assault. An interesting one, she claims that he claimed that he would kill her and her parents, and that he had a security guard that he threatened her with. But again, these are civil allegations. They are allegations. We want to present that. And his team has come in with a pretty strong demand. One thing they pointed out was that prior to this lawsuit, there had been a demand letter, something that says, hey, here's what we're going to do, here's what we're alleging. We'd like to enter into a settlement agreement before we go to court, before this gets messy, before this gets public. Well, his attorney comes in and says, hey, we knew this was coming, and we didn't, we're denying all these allegations. He says we take these allegations seriously and we unequivocally deny all of them. The allegations are categorically false and reckless. He goes on to state that this was a consensual and casual relationship that began 6 years ago and only came out after the relationship ended. Well, they got on the defensive, and one thing interesting that his team did was they went to the law enforcement and they filed a criminal complaint of extortion. And apparently an arrest warrant was issued for this woman, and also they've come out and said that we're going to file a lawsuit for defamatory statements. So she's filed this lawsuit, but she's facing some threat here. She's going to have to respond and defend a defamation lawsuit. I don't know if she's going to be arrested, but it was reported that warrant for arrest was sent out. So she's facing, her own threat and her risks, and I think this will get her attention. Again, this is they're claiming consensual, and so when it comes down to it, unless she has other evidence, this becomes a real he said, she said thing, and I don't think it's been reported that she ever went to the police and made allegations of assault and rape and that type of thing, or there was a rape kit. Again, his attorney reports that this all came about after the relationship ended.
All right. Hey, real quick, actually, since we're in this space of civil lawsuits and sexual assault allegations, before we get to the bizarre story involving BJ Penn, I wanted to ask you today, Preston, about the Jake Retzloff story and how there really has been no news since you and I last spoke about it, and what it says to you as our legal expert that after the civil suit was filed, no criminal charges have been filed since. What does that say to you, if anything at all?
Well, yeah, I've talked a lot about this with attorneys, and we've talked about it, and it's a good point because we've got the Retzloff civil lawsuit alleging rape and assault, and we've got the Zion lawsuit. If we want to contrast these, Zion's was a long-term relationship called the casual relationship, but also a consensual relationship. So in the end, he's kind of stating, hey, yeah, this happened, and I'm going to defend it. It was all consensual. Retzloff, on the other, and again, no criminal charges against Zion. Retzloff, on the other hand, it's a civil lawsuit, and what's happening right now, Spence, is his defense team is preparing what's called an answer to the complaint. I heard that an amended complaint was filed after we kind of hit on this. So what the plaintiffs did is they looked at their complaint and said, oh, wait a minute, we might want to change a few things. We might want to add a few things. So they amended the complaint. And from that point, what happens is you serve a summons on the other person. That would be Jake Retzloff in this case. And I'll bet that didn't happen. I'll bet his attorney said, hey, we'll accept service because we don't want you to have a process server going up to his door and knocking on the door and say, here you go. So they probably did that. And there's a time limit that you have a chance to respond to the complaint. And what it does is it's paragraph by paragraph. They'll come in and will admit, certain probably minor things like, yeah, Jake Retzloff's a resident of this county. But then they'll go through and they'll probably deny categorically all of the other allegations through there. And so, and then that starts the process of the litigation, the discovery and everything. I don't know about the criminal charges. I think it's interesting that she did go to law enforcement and that they claim that there was a rape kit. I would bet that there's an investigation going on right now because the Provo City attorney or the Utah County attorney, whoever it was reported to, they did claim, they said, we have reports that line up with what happened here. So I think they're under pressure to not just kind of brush this aside and look at it. And we don't know what's happening right now, but I bet that's going on. One thing, Spence, we talked about, and this is just pure lawyer conjecture. One defense said Jake Retzloff, and it doesn't look like he's going to do it. He could say this was a consensual situation, but then it throws him into a big problem saying, hey, yeah, this happened, and that puts him in a big problem with the honor code. So as we know it, I'm just throwing that out there as a possible defense. As we know it, he is denying everything, basically claiming his attorney said he is factually innocent. That's what we know.
All right, moving over to, like I alluded to earlier, I didn't know there was an update, but I had heard a little bit about this maybe, I don't know, a few months back where BJ Penn, who once upon a time was one of the baddest dudes on the planet. He's a UFC Hall of Famer. He was arrested again on Friday of last week in Hawaii in relation to these ongoing claims that his family has been murdered and replaced with imposters. This is a bizarre situation. Preston, fill us in.
Yeah, Spence, good one, because I wrote at the top of the story, bizarre stuff going on.
Yep.
BJ Penn, I'd never heard of him. You mentioned he was a really good UFC fighter, a Hall of Fame fighter. Hall of Fame in 2015. His last fight was in 2019. But most recently, and this is the first I've heard about this, he has been arrested 3 times in the last week. And the first one was for claiming domestic abuse. His mother claims that he pushed and shoved her. And so as a result, what'd she do? She went and got a temporary restraining order. The court granted that. That was a 180-day restraining order. I think it set a limit of 100 feet. He couldn't be within 100 feet of her. And then what does he do? He goes and breaks into her house again, and she claims that she has it on video that he stole some items, jewelry, credit card, driver's license, and that he filled up her deadbolt locks with glue. So this is all on video. So he gets arrested again for, number one, violating the temporary restraining order and these other issues. And, he doesn't show up to court, and arrest warrant sent out for him again, and he's arrested again. And, you mentioned it. She comes out with a statement, and it's best to read it. He's suffering from Capgras, delusional syndrome, psychiatric disorder in which a person holds a delusion that a close family member or someone was replaced by an identical imposter. She said he believes that an imposter who has killed his family to gain control of the family assets. The first thing that came to my mind, Spence, was what? CTE, right? I mean, this guy took a few thumps on the head, and clearly he's got some things going on. Sad story, but he's been arrested again. I'm guessing that he probably, I haven't seen a report whether he'll make bail and he'll be let out, but 3 times in a week is kind of a problem.
All right, final one for today. At some point, maybe we need to implement a Sports Court Hall of Fame because our guy Yasiel Puig may be on the list. It's been a while since we've discussed anything regarding him, but the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit looked like his sports betting guilty plea has been overturned by a federal court. So what's the latest here?
Yeah, interesting decision, Spence. We did talk about this a time or two, and Yasiel Puig, I remember him as just big physical specimen who played for the Dodgers. That's what I kind of remember of him. And he, in 2019, it was claimed that he placed 900 bets on basketball and football, no baseball, but basketball and football, through a sports betting, a black market sports betting group. And this claimed that this happened in California, which California prohibits sports betting. Well, as part of this and part of the investigation, the Department of Justice, they got together with Yasiel and they interviewed him. And one of the things in the interview, they warned him that if you make a false statement, you could face charges of obstruction of justice and making a false statement. Well, later they come in, and I think it's interesting. They're not charging him with the actual gambling things, but I think as a chance to kind of get at him, they said, "Hey, wait a minute, we're going to charge you with making a false statement." And so he initially in January of 2022, he agrees to a plea deal for making a false statement. Well, fast forward, and he gets a lawyer, and in November 2022, he withdraws his guilty plea, claiming a couple of number of things, that he was not represented by his own attorney, that he was unprepared, and that he's Cuban, and that there was a court-appointed interpreter. So as part of the plea deal, DOJ claims, hey, you waived your right to go forward with a defense and to contest any of this stuff. And so when he came in and said, I'm withdrawing my plea, the Department of Justice, they appealed it to the federal court. And the federal court has come out and said, number one, in order for that, they're claiming he breached the plea agreement. And they're claiming in order for there to be a breach of the agreement, first off, there needs to be an agreement that's enforceable by the court. And he needs to understand the agreement. And their ultimate conclusion is, they state the agreement requiring the court's approval, because that approval never occurred. The agreement was not enforceable by the court under our precedent. So essentially they came down with the conclusion that, hey, there was no agreement, so back the truck up, go back to the drawing board, see what you want to do, Department of Justice, and apparently we'll see what happens on just the gambling charges, because that's what's in place now.
All right, Preston, before I set you loose on a Thursday, for any of our listeners who have legal questions, how do they get a hold of you over at Handy and Handy?
Yeah, we'd love to hear from anyone out there and help you with your legal issues, especially if you have a personal injury case. That's what we specialize in. Give us a call. Call us at 801-264-6677. You'll talk to either me or Garrett, unless he's globetrotting like he is right now, or jump on our website at handylawutah.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay, thank you, sir, as always, for your time. Have a great weekend, and as always, go Utes.
Hey, Spence, thanks. Go Utes.
All right, Preston Handy, a little sports court on a Thursday afternoon. We'll launch into the 5 o'clock hour of the program today, coming up after a quick break. If you're just hopping in your car and starting your commute home, you may have missed the breaking news that BYU has signed Kevin Young to a long-term contract extension. That was announced about 30 minutes ago. Sham Sharani is the one who broke the news, and BYU themselves have released a video and a statement backing it up. So BYU has signed Kevin Young to a long-term contract extension. When the Phoenix Suns job came open, there were a lot of people pontificating on the possibility of Kevin Young going back to pro basketball and taking that Phoenix Suns job, but he will stay put in Provo, as it is one of the most highly anticipated basketball seasons in the history of Brigham Young University, coming up with A.J. DeBonce on the roster, the potential #1 pick from next year. All right, for next year, I should say. We got 3 hours down. We have 1 hour to go. Another piece of breaking news. Porter's favorite football player of all time, Aaron Rodgers, plans to sign with the Steelers, according to sources. I don't want to speak for you, but I think I just did. Isn't it fair to say it's like Emmitt Smith 1, Aaron Rodgers 2? He's in that.
Yeah, there you go.
In that area, isn't that right?
Yeah, there you go. Hot take. Maybe not a hot take, but the 21-year streak of Pittsburgh Steelers being 500 or better, yeah, that's over. If he's a starter, that's over.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know what other options they have on that roster. I think they've been waiting for this. So that is a piece of NFL news that people have been waiting for quite some time. All right, 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. 5 o'clock hour of the program comes your way next. Tonight is the NBA Finals. We'll go live to Oklahoma City, and we'll check in with one of our NBA guys and get you ready for tip-off, which comes your way at 6:30. And you can hear that game right here on your home of the NBA playoffs, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, let's get it. Driving 5 time Thursday afternoon style. It's a lovely day outside. It's about 68 degrees, a little cloudy here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah, on this beautiful, beautiful June Thursday afternoon. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. We are about 90 minutes away from tip-off tonight in Oklahoma City, where the Indiana Pacers and the Oklahoma City Thunder will get going for the NBA Finals. The Oklahoma City Thunder are a 9.5-point favorite to win the game tonight, and an overwhelming favorite in Las Vegas to win the series. The 5 o'clock hour of the program tonight is brought to you by our friends at All Poly Sports and their Rising Stars Camp, which is coming up on June the 13th through the 18th at Lone Peak Park, which is 10140 South, 700 East in Sandy. Full padded, full contact camp, but you must provide your own equipment, meaning helmet, shoulder pads, knee pads, chin strap, mouth guard, jersey, and cleats. Your camp fee does not include lodging, meals, football equipment, or transportation. Due to NCAA rules, reduced fee or scholarships are not available, and All Poly Sports Camp is non-refundable. You can register for the Rising Stars Camp if you are currently in grade 6 through the 8th. Go to allpolysports.com. All right, we're going to go live to Oklahoma City, and we're going to bring in Timmy Goodtime Bontemps from ESPN to preview tonight's Game 1 of the NBA Finals between the Pacers and the Thunder. Couple of pieces of breaking news in case you missed it throughout the course of your busy Thursday work day. Brigham Young University has extended the contract of Kevin Young. Kevin Young obviously has landed on the ground and done a great job after only 1 year in Provo. It's been characterized as, quote, a long-term contract extension. Of course, BYU does not announce terms, nor is it possible to even figure out what it is. But a long-term extension, according to BYU. The news was broken by Sham Sharani, and then BYU themselves released a statement. So Brian Santiago, and his first point of emphasis on the job, and he said this, his top priority, keeping Kevin Young in Provo, and that's exactly what he did. So a long-term extension, keeping Kevin Young in Provo for the foreseeable future. Here's a quote from Kevin. Quote, "My family and I have loved our first year at BYU, being surrounded by great people at a great university with shared values. I'm excited to continue to build a program based on trying to help young men prepare for the NBA at the highest of levels and do it at BYU." Of course, BYU went to the Sweet 16 for the first time in over a decade last year with Kevin Young at the helm, and the best recruiting class in program history, including A.J. DeBonsa, who is thought to be the number 1 pick in the NBA draft next year, has allowed Kevin Young to really get this thing going. BYU is widely seen as a top 10 team heading into 2025, and some outlets have them higher. They're playing at Madison Square Garden. They have a season opener in Vegas against Villanova. They're going to play North Carolina here at the Delta Center in Salt Lake. So exciting stuff if you're a BYU fan. This is from Brian Santiago. Quote, "This is an exciting time for all of BYU athletics." With Brian, oh, no, this is more from Kevin, excuse me. Quote, "This is an exciting time for all of BYU athletics with Brian Santiago recently being named athletic director. I look forward to continuing to work with Brian, and I'm excited to be in lockstep with his leadership." So there you go. There's a little bit of breaking news. It's been kind of a random, busy show. Aaron Rodgers has a new home. It is as a Pittsburgh Steeler. He is en route to Pittsburgh right now to join the Steelers, and he probably will be their starting quarterback this year. So a couple pieces of breaking news on the program today. If you missed Dave McMiniman earlier, some good stuff there, previewing tonight's NBA Finals and also talking Jazz offseason with the appointment of Austin Ainge as your president of basketball ops for the Utah Jazz this week. And so good stuff with Dave McMiniman. The world of professional golf has their eyes on the RBC Canadian Open, so we caught up with Paul Pugmire today. And then Belle Frazier for some Utah Mammoth. Ooh, I almost said hockey club again. For some Utah Mammoth conversation, as we are just a few weeks away from the NHL draft. And also Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals last night was a barn burner. Edmonton got it done in their home arena in overtime over Florida, so they take a 1-0 lead, and they now advance to Friday's game back up in Edmonton, where they will try to take a 2-0 lead. Last year's Stanley Cup Final featured these two teams and saw Florida win the first 3 games, Edmonton go on to win the next 3, and then Florida ultimately was able to get it done in Game 7. It has been 32 years since a Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup. So there you go. All right, we've been discussing this all day today, getting you ready for the NBA Finals. Porter and I both gave you our picks earlier Pacers Thunder, as I referenced, Oklahoma City is a 9.5-point favorite to win the game tonight, and I think they're plus 750 to win the series in Las Vegas. When this became the matchup that manifested itself after the conference finals were over, my initial reaction was this will not be close. And then digging into the matchup, looking at some of the numbers, I actually was wrong. It will be even worse than I thought. I feel like this is a 5-game series, and I'm hoping that we get close games. Earlier, McMenamin referenced the 2012 finals between Miami and Oklahoma City. The last time OKC was in the finals, they took on LeBron and D-Wade and Bosh and the Heat, and that was the OKC team that had Westbrook and Durant and Harden. And it went 5 games, but all 5 games were really close. So hopefully we see something like that. These two teams played twice in the regular season. Oklahoma City smoked them both times. OKC played their last game against Indiana without Chet. It was a 21-point drubbing. In the 2 games they played, Tyrese Halliburton has been locked down and put in jail. We're talking 11 points and 5 assists. Halliburton is 19 points, 10 assists in this playoff run. But I just don't think Indiana has the cross-matchup options defensively that they had against the New York Knicks. And Oklahoma City is this team right now that will beat you at whatever style you want to play. So my guess is if you've been studying the NBA Finals, if you've been listening to people talk about this matchup, you've heard a lot of people say, well, Indiana simply has to outrun them. They have to get up and down the floor. Well, that is true because it's the only hope Indiana has. Here's your problem, okay? Pace of play, the teams in the postseason, the fastest team with pace of play is Memphis. That's a small sample size because they were ousted early. The second fastest team as far as pace goes in the NBA playoffs, Oklahoma City. Indiana's third. Oklahoma City has very few weak spots, but if you look at it, it is they foul a lot, but that is intentionally because in playoff basketball, physicality is allowed. And they also, as a team, aren't great at free throw shooting. They're good. They're not great. But so it's rebounding and it's the free throw line, the 2 areas that OKC is a little bit vulnerable, but Indiana is not designed to capitalize on those strengths, I should say those weaknesses, because Indiana's roster features Miles Turner, who's a decent rim protector. He actually leads the playoffs in block shots, total block shots. He's an average defender for a player that big. And then they bring Tony Bradley off the bench, who, by the way, is day-to-day. He might not play tonight. And Thomas Bryant, who had a good Game 6 against the Knicks. But that's not a front line that's going to scare Oklahoma City when OKC can march out Isaiah Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams, the second Jalen Williams, the big, not the wing. Like, if you dig into this, and if Indiana decides that they want to go small and they want to run up and down the floor, even if they play Pascal Siakam as a quasi-stretch 5 and they sit Miles Turner and they bring in Benedict Mathurin or Ben Shepherd or Obi Toppin or TJ McConnell and they try to go small, Oklahoma City can do that because we saw them do that against the Minnesota Timberwolves. Chris Finch decided to sit Rudy Gobert, and Mark Daigneault decided to sit Hartenstein and play Chet at the 5 and then surround Chet with just 4 dynamic, big, long, athletic wings that can get up and down the floor and guard multiple positions. You can't hand a great offensive player off to anybody on OKC and expect a great matchup. You can't hunt Shea because Shea is 6'8", and he's a great defensive player. They're going to try to put Shea in a blender the same way they did against the New York Knicks with Jalen. And that's not because Shea is a bad defensive matchup, because he's not. He's really good. They're just going to try to tire him out so he can't be Shea on the offensive side of the floor. But I just don't think it's going to work. And when you look at the depth that OKC has, they have depth that the Knicks did not to throw at Indiana's depth when Rick goes 11 deep. Mark Daigneault can do the same thing. Cason Wallace, Alex Caruso, Isaiah Joe, Jalen Williams, the big, Aaron Wiggins if they wanted to, and they could even go deeper. They've got 11 or 12 guys that can really play just like Indiana can. So the other weird thing about Oklahoma City, of the 16 teams that made the postseason, Oklahoma City is 13th in three-point shooting. Like, they don't need to rely on the 3-ball like the Boston Celtics have in the past, or oftentimes like the Indiana Pacers have relied upon during this postseason run. Like, the Pacers probably need to make, I don't know, between 15 and 23s to even be in the game. And Oklahoma City doesn't play that way. Like, I keep talking about how the analytical community this season in the playoffs for the NBA, you guys are taking L's. You guys are taking some losses as far as how you think this game has to be played while you analyze it with your calculator. Oklahoma City is throwing all that out the window. A lot of people have utilized the analogy of a starting pitcher in Major League Baseball, basically saying that Mark Daigneault has essentially 6 or 7 different pitches. You want to go big? All right, Hartenstein, Chet, same lineup. You want to go small? Hartenstein sits, Chet's your 5. You want to go in the half court? Shea is going to eat you up. You want to run up and down the court? We can do that too. We're actually better than you at that. So whatever Indiana decides to do, Oklahoma City can look them in the eye and say, we'll do that too and we'll beat you. I think this is a 5-game series because of the respect I have for Rick Carlisle. I'm giving the Pacers 1 game. I'll say probably that proverbial game 3 at home. Tonight could get sloppy early. This is a massive stage, and there's so much on the line. This is going to sound weird, but at the age of 26, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has a chance to be a Hall of Famer, okay? If he wins the Finals MVP, which I believe he will, I think this is kind of an easy bet if you're into that. If Oklahoma City wins the championship and Shai wins the Finals MVP after already winning the regular season MVP, he joins a list of Shaq, Tim Duncan, LeBron, and Steph. He'd be the 5th since 2000. That puts you in the Hall of Fame. He is your reigning MVP for a reason. He has been incredibly great all year long. And the Indiana Pacer lineup that was able to cause the Knicks so much problems defensively, it's pretty simple. Jalen Brunson's 5'11". He might be 6 feet on a good day. Okay, so Aaron Nesmith at 6'3", 6'4", can match up with him physically. Andrew Nembhard at 6'1", 6'2", can match up with him physically. Aaron Nesmith and Andrew Nembhard are 5 and 6 inches shorter than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So they don't have a good matchup for Shai. I wonder if they're going to march out Siakam to try to guard Shai with Siakam. They're not going to do with Halliburton because Shai would just eat his lunch. Does Benedict Mathurin have a bigger role than he has prior to in this postseason because he's got size that maybe Andrew Nembhard does not? There's not a space in this series for small guards that Indiana has on their roster. I wouldn't be surprised if Nembhard can't play or T.J. McConnell can't play. And we see more Ben Shepherd and Benedict Mathurin and Obi Toppin off the bench because at least they have size and athleticism and physicality. Bottom line is this feels impossible for Indiana. I thought it was initially. Then I dug into the matchup and watched some film and dug into the regular season stuff. I would be stunned if the Pacers get more than 1 game. I want to be clear. I hope it's a long series with great basketball because neither of the conference finals had a Game 7. But the NBA Finals, Game 1, it is tonight in just about 1 hour and 20 minutes or so away. TV is on ABC, and the radio is here on ESPN 700. We'll go live to Oklahoma City coming up on the other side to bring in our guy Timmy Goodtime Bontemps to give us the scene setter. We'll also talk some Jazz off season with Tim. He knows Austin Ainge really well. He actually broke the news that Austin Ainge was being hired as the president of basketball ops for the Jazz. So some good stuff with Timmy coming up on the other side of a Thursday drive right here on ESPN 700. All right, wrapping it up. Final segment of the show for this Thursday. Weekend time tomorrow. So congratulations on that. Looking to be a warm weekend. We had a little bit of a cool down this week, which is always nice in June. But Al Roker in there pointed out yesterday that it's still spring. I mean, semantics, splitting hairs. June is usually hot, okay? I mean, you don't have to get mad at me because I got a season wrong. I was just saying June's usually hotter than it is this week.
That's okay. I'm not. Listen, I don't care about the details, really. I'm a pretty laissez-faire guy.
Are you?
I'm just letting you know.
When it comes to weather patterns and birds, you're not.
This is true.
Those are two things you're very adamantly passionate about.
I'm keenly aware of when the solstice is. That's all.
Is it summer solstice?
June 19th. 20th?
Is Mercury in retrograde?
I don't know about that one.
That's the one you have to watch out for because that's when stuff gets weird. That's when decisions are made by white women that cause chaos. When Mercury is in retrograde, hide the kids,
what's
hide
going
the
on?
wife.
Is that what's going on?
Yeah, it is. It is.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. I didn't realize what was going on until you actually, and let me be clear, I don't watch cable news anymore. It's not allowed on my house, not allowed on and I'm talking about every network. So before you write emails, everyone calm down. Not just one network. There's one that's the worst perpetrator, but they're all not allowed in my house. And I'm watching the NBA Finals tonight, but we've got a little feud. We've got a little feud between the current president of the United States and the current owner of Tesla and Starlink and wherever the hell else he does.
I've reversed my intake. I now have Fox News on one TV
and
all
you do now?
MSNBC on the other.
Nice.
Just got to keep my tug of war going between the two. Yeah, man. Listen, I could have told you that breakup was going to happen a long time ago. Maybe not this soon, but yeah, the richest man on the planet and the most powerful man on the planet are having a little falling out on social media.
Well, the good news is one of them has the nuclear codes and the other has all of our personal data. So
right.
what could go wrong?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thoughts and prayers to these two kids. Best of luck getting back together. We're all pulling for you or whatever the hell else. Don't write emails. I'm not in the mood for it. All right. Let me ask you this. Do you think tonight gets loose? Do you think OKC smokes them, or do you think it's close? I'll say this. These are two young teams that have never experienced this stage.
Yeah.
I would not be shocked if at the end of the first it's like 14-10 with like 7 turnovers each and nobody's hitting shots. The adrenaline is going to be rushing through both of them.
Yeah, I think game one is going to be a really tough one to read. Ultimately, Oklahoma City's roster and their MVP should overwhelm Indiana. But in a game one, in a stage where none of these players have been, I don't really know what to expect. It could be sloppy. It could be ugly. And I think, Spence, if that's the case, it could lean into Indiana's favor. Not saying they're going to win, but that could make it so that they can make it interesting.
Yeah, we'll have to see. You said this earlier, and I completely agree. While I believe this is insurmountable and somewhat impossible for Indiana, as a basketball fan, I want to see two things: good basketball and a lot of games. I would love it if it was 6 or 7 games. I just don't think Indiana can make it more than 5, but we'll have to see what happens. Congrats to Kevin Young, long-term contract extension. BYU locks in their basketball coach. Porter's life hero and mentor, Aaron Rodgers, is a Steeler. Did I do a better job of accurately describing his role in your life?
Life mentor. Hey, I mean, I would take a Super Bowl ring.
And that's probably it.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can stop there.
Fair enough. All right, we'll get out of here. NBA Finals action comes your way. Coming up on the other side, Porter, what comes our way on a Friday edition of The Drive?
On a Friday edition of the program, of course, we will react to NBA Finals Game 1. We'll go all over the map on a Friday. Howard Beck for your NBA Daily Assist. We'll double up on the NBA Daily Assist with one Zach Harper on a Friday. We'll catch up with one Gordon Monson fresh off a trip to the islands. And also Mad Dog Russo. So a couple of old school radio guys and a couple of new school radio guys.
That'll be fun. That'll be a great Friday show. Join us for that. Special thank you as we say goodnight to Tim Bontemps, Dave McMiniman, Paul Pugmire, and Bill Frazier. For any of the sound you may have missed from the show, website, ESPN700sports.com. Download our mobile app and take us on the go. Best way to listen to the station. It's how I do it. ESPN 700 app is available in the App Store and the Google Play Store. Then finally, for what we do in our space every afternoon for 4 hours, check out, follow along the podcast as far as wherever you get shows, we're there. Our podcast is called the same as our show. It's The Drive with Spence Checketts. We would appreciate your support, and it's a win-win, as Michael Scott would say, win-win-win. You get to listen to whatever portion of our show you want to on your time. The Drive with Spence Checketts. Subscribe, rate, review, say nice things in the comments. Give us all the stars. Reporter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. NBA Finals Game 1 comes your way coming up on the other side right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN Radio Network.